Before we begin, let's slow everything down. You're not here to learn dates, or memorize rules, or keep track of every name. This channel exists for quiet watching, for long stories told gently, from a distance where nothing is urgent. We walk through strange worlds and broken timelines the way Prismo watches them from the center of time. Calmly, patiently, letting moments unfold without rushing them. If you're still awake and you want more journeys like this waiting for you later, you can quietly subscribe or leave a like. And if you're already drifting, that's perfect. Let's begin. The tower is already falling when the universe decides to let go of them. Stone shears away in slow-motion slabs, embers spiral upward against the direction of gravity. And somewhere far below, a city full of sleeping windows waits to either wake up or never wake at all. In the center of the collapsing stairwell, there is one figure, one unnamed hero, braced between two cracking walls, holding a chain that anchors the last intact spell-keeping reality from tearing like wet paper. They are not famous. They are not chosen. They are just the one who happened to climb high enough before the fire reached the library at the top, before the tower that catalogued every timeline in the multiverse began to fold in on itself like a burned page. Their hands shake. Their breath fogs the air. Their shoulders are already bleeding where falling stone has kissed them. And as they pull, as they make that final world-saving choice to hold on for one more second, something colder than the night moves through the scene. Time exhales. Here is the thing. You don't always feel the moment history lets go of you, but they do. It starts at the edges. Shelves of glowing records along the walls flicker, then curl inward. Each page of history blackening from the margins, words shriveling into ash before the flames can even touch them. Statues in distant plazas, carved in their honor in futures that will no longer exist, begin to smooth over, the chisel marks erased, the faces melting back into blank, polite stone. Names fade from monuments that haven't been built yet. An anthem that once held their surname in its final verse loses a syllable, then a consonant, then the melody that made it catch in the throat. On a battlefield centuries from this tower, a child who would have whispered their legend before charging into the dark now stands in the same mud, feeling a courage they cannot trace. You could blame a villain for this, some cosmic censor with a grudge, but the erasers that arrive are quiet, gentle. The universe appears here as an overworked librarian at the center of time, spectral hands closing a file that has been misshelved for eons. Time itself rolls through the stairwell like a tired tide, carefully washing away footprints, smoothing the dust where our heroes' boots have scraped. Memory follows behind, as a sleepy curator walking through a museum at closing, turning off plaques one by one, dimming the lights on every exhibit where this life once hung. The hero feels it, not as a scream, but as a soft subtraction. The weight of their own name loosens in their mind. Faces they loved blur at the corners. There is a moment where they could panic, could let go, could decide that a world that won't remember them doesn't deserve to be saved. Instead, they tighten their grip on the chain. They lean into the strain. They smile, just a little, at the absurdity of arguing with the filing system of the cosmos. Because we're going to be honest, the rules here are older than any single desire. This is just how the archive stays tidy enough to function at all. Some heroes get footnotes, some get statues, some get this: a clean erasure, a kindness that looks, from the inside, like disappearance. Think about that for a second as the tower finishes its long, slow fall. The chain snaps. The spell discharges in a ring of invisible power that never makes it into any legend, and the city below survives a catastrophe it will never know it almost had. Above, the last page with this hero's name on it folds into ash between invisible fingers. The scene freezes, and then we pull back, out of the stairwell, out of the burning library, out of this single collapsing tower that was once a local center of time. We see it as one pinprick in a vast sleeping map of existence, a constellation of similar erasures scattered across ages and worlds. This hero is not an exception. They are a pattern. Tonight in this video, we're going to walk the entire hidden timeline of the lost heroes the universe quietly filed away, so you can drift off knowing exactly what was forgotten and why. What we're tracing tonight: the full timeline of lost heroes. So here is the thing. Once you realize that erased heroes are a pattern and not an accident, you need a map, a full cosmic transit diagram of everyone who saved reality and then quietly stepped off the timeline. In this video, we're going to trace that entire arc, from the first nameless guardians standing in the dark before history existed, all the way to the modern stranger who pulls you back from the edge, nods once, and disappears into a crowd that never even looks up. Let's start with the big promise. We're going to walk this universe chronologically, as gently as you might walk through a sleeping house at night. First, the primordial guardians, the pre-language protectors who held back extinctions and timelines collapsing before there were myths, before there were even words for hero. Then the prehistory champions whose stories survive only as warped legends and half-remembered constellations. After that, we move into ancient civilizations, into temples and epics where you can feel the outline of someone missing, like a name scraped off a monument. From there, we'll drift into medieval eras where entire orders of erased knights and forgotten saints fought in wars that still shape your reality, but left no personal trace. Records burned, names edited, deeds reassigned to safer, more convenient figures. And finally, we arrive in the modern age. The unsung saviors, the anonymous medics, the whistleblowers, the stranger who holds the door in a way that changes your whole day. Not flashy power, not comic book destiny, just quiet, precise interventions in the multiverse of ordinary life. Along the way, we'll talk about the mechanics, because being lost is not just being unlucky, it has rules. Memory erasure, where an entire village forgets the one person who stood between them and oblivion. Timeline pruning, where a cosmic bureaucracy trims branches of existence, and with them the people who once lived there. Cursed anonymity, where the price of a wish to save everyone is that no one can ever remember you did it. Think about that for a second. The universe as a careful editor, cutting its own heroes for pacing. The lost hero in this universe is not a side trope. They are the central figure, the person who saves everything and then dissolves from the record, like a dream you can almost remember when you wake up and reach for it. They are the negative space around every legend, the missing co-author of every official story. Without them, the timeline doesn't just get less dramatic, it stops making emotional sense. And that is where the stakes become strangely intimate. There is loneliness here, heartbreak, the quiet ache of realizing that most of what protects your existence was built by people you will never know, whose faces you will never see. But there is also a kind of comfort, almost a lullaby. The idea that you are held up by invisible hands, that you live inside a safety someone else paid for and then stepped away from. So tonight, this will not be a frantic highlight reel of battles and glory. This will be a slow, guided walk through ages and timelines, a soft commentary track laid over cataclysms and erased victories. The drama is enormous. The telling will be low and steady, like a voice at the center of time explaining how the universe quietly edits itself while you drift towards sleep. By the end, you'll know the full story of the lost heroes, even if they still don't know you. And once we've drawn that map, we can finally go back to the very first point on it, the moment the universe invented forgetting as a price for survival. From first sparks to final names, tonight's roadmap through erased history. So here is the thing, if we're going to trace a whole erased timeline, you need a gentle roadmap before we start messing with reality. You are going to fall asleep in the middle of this universe-length story, and that's fine. The map will keep the narrative walking forward, even while your conscious mind drifts sideways. Let's start at the very beginning, in the dark before handwriting, before myths had editors. First, we'll move through the age of primordial guardians, those early protectors who stood between fragile human existence and a universe that did not yet care if we survived. In that era, we'll slow down for a single turning point, a prehistoric storm rescue, when one nameless person walked into a wall of ice and wind so their small group could see another sunrise. No records, no statues, just a decision that echoes down the entire timeline. From there, we're going to step into the first real cities, the brick and dust phase of civilization, where writing appears and immediately starts leaving people out. This is the era of unnamed champions, engineers who kept walls from collapsing, healers who never signed their own tablets, workers who rebuilt after fires. Our anchor moment here will be an ancient city saved from collapse by a quiet redesign of its foundations, a single mind preventing thousands of deaths, and then being filed away under collective effort, until even that label burns. Then we slide into the classical and medieval stretch, the age of lost knights and erased healers, saints without names, and mercenaries without graves. Here the pattern continues. We'll sketch the context of crusades and plagues, then zoom in on one or two emblematic lives. A plague quietly halted by a traveling physician, whose notes are later used but never cited. A war diverted at the last minute because a minor commander faked a delay in the wrong set of orders. Think about that for a second. An entire branch of the multiverse pruned by someone history literally calls unknown. After that, the world industrializes, and the forgetting accelerates. This is the early modern and industrial arc, full of unsung workers at the center of time zones and rail lines and factory floors. Our key moment here is a disaster prevented by a single overlooked decision, a safety inspector who insists on one more test, a clerk who misfiles the document that would have put the wrong chemical in the wrong river. Not magic, just bureaucracy, accidentally saving the universe. Finally, we arrive in the contemporary haze of invisible saviors, anonymous coders patching security holes, nurses catching silent infections, neighbors who call at exactly the right moment. Here, our turning point is quieter but sharper. A modern war that never quite happens because a translator softens a phrase in a tense meeting, nudging reality away from the brink. In each era, the rhythm will stay the same so your brain can relax. First, the mood and rules of the age, then one or two lost heroes inside it, then the method of their erasure, and finally, the gap they leave in the official story you think you know. Some vanish because of cosmic edits, magical resets that rewrite the timeline like a wish gone strangely literal. Others disappear through smaller powers, burned archives, lazy historians, bureaucratic indifference. The contrast matters. It's the difference between a universe that deliberately prunes its own narrative and a filing cabinet that just tips over at the wrong moment. And running underneath all of this, in that specifically Adventure Time way, there's a hidden meta-timeline we'll keep circling back to. A quiet system, half cosmic, half human, that decides who gets remembered and who dissolves into the background of existence. In this video, we're going to follow that unseen editor from the first forgotten guardian to the last missing name, until the pattern behind the erasures stops feeling random and starts feeling like a set of rules you can almost articulate as you drift off. When we come back from this map, we'll finally step over the threshold into that first age, where the universe is young, the dangers are loud, and the heroes are completely nameless. Get cozy with ghosts of history, settling in before we begin. And before we step into that loud, nameless first age, this is the moment where you get to do the opposite of those heroes. You get to be remembered by your pillow. So, take a second and physically reset your little corner of the universe. Adjust your pillows, unkink your shoulders, maybe roll onto the side that feels like the timeline with the least resistance. If you can, dim the lights. Let the room fall into that soft pre-dream blur where edges stop arguing with each other. You don't have to watch the screen. You can just let it glow in the background, like a tiny, loyal star at the edge of your personal multiverse. Here is the thing. This video is built so you do not have to work. You're not in a test. You're in a guided drift. You can close your eyes. You can let my voice become background radiation, humming at the center of time while you fall away from the day. If your attention wanders, that's not a failure. That is literally the design. The names, the dates, the specific battles will keep marching by whether you're listening sharply or dissolving into sleep. Think about that for a second. Most of the heroes we're going to talk about didn't get remembered even once. You, half asleep with one sock on and one sock missing in action, are already doing better than entire forgotten civilizations. And since we're here together in this quiet little pocket of existence, I'll ask you for one small awake world wish. If you feel safe enough, tap the like button, or subscribe, or leave a tiny comment that only future you will remember. In a universe full of erased efforts and invisible labor, that is a strangely powerful gesture. Not loud, not grand. Just a small, remembered act in a world built on unremembered ones, a way of saying, I see this, in the middle of a timeline that usually edits that sentence out. Let's start setting your expectations the way a tide sets the shoreline. You do not need to cling to every detail. Engagement here is not about constant focus. It's about letting ideas wash over you, again and again, until they slowly reveal a shape underneath. Like waves rolling back from a buried statue, each pass clears just a little more sand, and even if you sleep through half of it, you'll wake up with the outline of the story pressed gently into your mind. Because before we walk through centuries of lost guardians, we need to understand what a lost hero actually is. Not just a character who missed their Wikipedia entry, but a symbol of how reality edits itself. Time is not a neutral archivist. It is an overworked, underpaid cosmic editor with terrible handwriting and a deadline. Wars, cataclysms, magical resets, bureaucratic errors in the archive of existence. These are the red pens. Heroes vanish in the margins. In this video, we're going to treat each of those vanishings like a wish the universe quietly granted. Let this be forgotten. Sometimes merciful, sometimes cruel, always revealing. And as you drift, we'll follow that pattern all the way back to the first edit. When you're ready, even if your eyes are already closing, we'll step into that young universe and meet the first protector history never learned how to say by name. The lost hero as the heart of the story. Power, silence, and vanishing. Let's start with the image you probably had as we met that first protector. A figure at the edge of a young universe, holding back something terrible while the ink of history hasn't even dried yet. Here is the thing. In this timeline, that figure is not a side character. The lost hero is the central tension the whole mythos orbits around, the paradox beating like a quiet heart at the center of time. They are the one who saves the world and never gets to live inside it as a legend. They are the one who shapes history and then gets edited out of it with the same casual motion you'd use to close a tab. Infinite courage, zero recognition, world-changing action, blank pages, a life of meaning, an afterlife of silence in the records. Think about that for a second. The lost hero lives between legend and oblivion, between the story that happened and the story we tell, between the world that was possible and the one that survived. They stand between the wish and the memory of the wish, between the multiverse of what could have gone wrong and the single fragile timeline where you get to fall asleep tonight. They exist between cosmic scale and human attention span, which honestly is not a fair fight. In this video, we're going to treat that between as the main character, because the myth doesn't just need a villain or a catastrophe, or some glowing artifact of pure power. It needs someone who steps in, pays the cost, and then vanishes so cleanly that reality forgets to say thank you. Not a martyr performed in front of a crowd, more like a glitch fix that never makes the patch notes. And this archetype is not unique to one culture or one universe or one fandom. Unknown soldiers buried under anonymous stones, nameless saints whose miracles outlived their signatures, guardian spirits that whole villages thank without ever agreeing on a face, anonymous miracle workers in disaster reports, reduced to a bystander pulled several people to safety. They're all placeholders for the heroes we can't name but somehow feel pressing on the edges of existence. Across timelines, the costumes change, but the coordinates don't, always between danger and safety, between terror and mourning, between the universe that collapses and the one that limps forward, pretending nothing happened. In that specifically Adventure Time way, it's like a cosmic running gag. Reality keeps almost dying, and the punchline is that the person who stopped it doesn't get a line. And here is where it quietly loops back to you, because the lost hero is also a mirror, a reflection of your small kindnesses, your unnoticed labors, the way you hold up tiny corners of the world with no audience and no law. You live between what you do and what anyone will remember, between private desire and public silence. And this whole timeline of erased champions is, gently, also about you. As we move forward, we'll walk through ages where those quiet acts scale up into wars, cataclysms, and cosmic resets, and watch how, over and over, the universe learns to forget the hands that held it together. Before history had names, primordial guardians in the dark. So when we say the universe learns to forget, we should be honest about where that starts. It doesn't begin with archives or erased monuments. It begins out under an endless sky, with no names written anywhere at all, just cold air, animal breath, and a ring of faces around a small, stubborn fire. Let's start there. Small bands of humans moving through ice and mud at the edge of extinction, with glaciers on one horizon and volcanic glow on the other. There are no maps, no calendars, no center of time yet, just seasons hitting you in the face. Storms roll in like angry gods. Predators watch from the dark. And if you want to exist past tomorrow, you don't write a book. You tell a story while the embers are still warm. Here is the thing. Even then, someone is always walking a little ahead. A woman who can smell water under frozen ground. A hunter who reads the wind like it's a quiet private language. An elder who remembers which valley floods and which one doesn't. They don't call themselves heroes. They are just the one who stands up when the horizon looks wrong. Imagine one of them. A hunter, bones aching, eyes raw from snow glare. The temperature drops hard and fast, and a wall of white begins to eat the world. He feels the wind swing, understands the way the sky tightens, and drags his small tribe sideways into a narrow canyon, away from the open plain. They press against black rock while the storm screams past, an entire ice age compressed into one night. In the morning, the plain is gone. The people are not. That night, around the fire, they say his name over and over. They know exactly who saved them. His laugh, his limp, the way he always overcooks the meat. But time does what time always does. One generation turns into 3, then 10. The story gets shorter. The details fall off like frost from a coat. The hunter becomes the one who saved us long ago, then just the one who led us out of the ice. Think about that for a second. A whole existence compressed into a job title. This is the earliest mechanic of being lost. Not a curse, not some cosmic malice, just the way oral traditions sand down the edges. Many different rescues, many different migrations, many different exhausted hunters and waterfinders and path choosers, slowly merged into one archetypal guardian who walks ahead of the tribe in the dark. We're going to see this pattern over and over. Reality taking a messy multiverse of specific lives and averaging them into a single clean silhouette. It's efficient. It's memorable. It obeys the quiet rules of how brains and stories work. But if you tilt your head, it almost looks intentional. The gaps line up a little too neatly. The way separate heroes fuse into one first ancestor feels less like random erosion and more like the universe making a wish for simplicity. Because even here, before written language, there are patterns of forgetting that feel designed, as if existence itself prefers one nameless guardian walking through the blizzard instead of the dozens who actually did, and in the next age, we'll watch that preference harden into something much sharper. The first edit: how stories compress real heroes into one shadow. So let's start right there, in that blizzard with the nameless guardian dissolving into a single ancestor, and pull the camera back, because this is not a glitch. This is the first edit. This is how entire timelines of real people get pressed down into one shadow that can fit inside a campfire story. In an oral culture, you don't have hard drives. You have elders. You have nights that are too cold. And you have limited memory. The universe of your village's history has to live inside a few human skulls. And here is the thing. Skulls are not great archives. They are great compressors. Dozens of rescues, raids, inventions, and quiet acts of power all start as separate events. But every time the story is told, details get shaved off, merged or reassigned to whichever hero the audience already recognizes. At first, it's tiny. One hunter's clever trick with fire gets glued onto another hunter's famous storm journey, because it's easier to remember one impressive person than two moderately impressive ones. A midwife's impossible trek through floodwaters slides into the legend of the wandering chief. Their names blur, their faces blur, and then, one winter, a storyteller says, "Long ago, our ancestor walked through every disaster and kept us alive," and no one corrects them, because by now even the corrections have been forgotten. This is narrative efficiency. Human memory behaves like a cosmic wish that keeps asking for shorter, cleaner timelines. One hero instead of 10, one great migration instead of a century of messy, overlapping moves. Think about that for a second. The complexity doesn't vanish in reality, it just stops being narratively convenient, so it gets sacrificed at the altar of what can be held in a single breath. Imagine 3 separate disasters: a drought that drove one branch of the clan upriver, a coastal flood that pushed another inland, a war that scattered a third group into the hills. In reality, those journeys are led by different guides, different improvisers of survival, each making micro-wishes against extinction in the dark. But a few generations later, the story has collapsed into one great journey, led by a singular half-remembered guide who took our people from the old world to the new. The multiverse of real paths is still there in the ground, but in the story's center of time, it's just one clean line. We're going to see this compression again and again along the timeline of lost heroes. It starts as a practical adaptation, almost kind, because it preserves outcomes. The village still remembers that someone found the pass, someone tamed the river, someone negotiated peace. But that composite culture hero never actually existed. He is a mask woven out of erased faces. And quietly, that raises a question: how many turning points in our deep past, balanced on the courage or desire of people whose names we will never know? And is this only human forgetfulness, or is there some deeper rule in existence itself that keeps wishing for fewer names, fewer threads, fewer heroes left visible on the surface of time? When the first records fail, lost heroes of the earliest cities, so now we slip forward, out of pure legend and into brick and clay, into the first places that tried to pin memory down. The air smells like wet earth and smoke. You can hear reeds scratching wet tablets in a temple office, while outside, a river city hums in the dark. For the first time in this timeline, history isn't just breath and rumor. It's being nailed to reality. Let's start with the illusion that changes everything. Writing looks like a cure for forgetting. Names pressed into clay, kings marching in long, proud lines across stone walls, dates and grain counts, and war trophies recorded as if the universe itself had finally agreed to keep receipts. Scribes sit at the center of time for their city, freezing a chosen timeline of events while 1,000 other possibilities evaporate unmarked. Here is the thing: the moment you can write a hero down, you can also leave them out on purpose. Imagine a flood season gone wrong. The river rises too fast, the levees crack, and in the middle of the night it's not the king who saves the city, but a lowly canal builder who has spent his whole existence ankle-deep in mud. He sees the weak point, rallies exhausted workers, cuts a desperate spillway that diverts the water and keeps the temples from dissolving into slurry. In the morning, the city still stands. The tablets, however, will say the king appeased the river with an offering. Or picture an invasion. Scouts on the edge of the desert notice the dust of marching armies days before anyone else. One young woman, trained to read tracks and wind, calculates the enemy's path like she's reading a cosmic equation. She convinces a minor official to move supplies, to open the gates at night, to let refugees in before the siege closes. The city survives on food she quietly rerouted. The inscription later: "Under our great lord, the enemy was repelled." Not technically a lie, just a wishful edit. We're going to see this pattern again and again. The power to carve reality into stone becomes a political mechanic. Rulers decide whose courage becomes part of existence and whose courage becomes invisible scaffolding, holding up the glorious narrative of kings and generals. He is not evil. He is not even indifferent. He is just bound by rules older than himself, rules that say the space on the wall is limited and the god must be thanked before the builder. Think about that for a second. Every ziggurat, every pyramid, every perfect line of irrigation that turns desert into grain is a monument not just to one name, but to countless erased timelines of labor and planning. We walk through these ruins and see a single pharaoh or a single divine king, when in reality, we're standing inside a multiverse of anonymous hands. Pattern interrupt. If you listed every worker on the Great Pyramid, the cartouche would be longer than the monument. And once writing exists, forgetting stops being a passive fade and becomes an active choice. To leave a name off the tablet is to push that life toward non-existence. To chisel a rival's face off a relief is to rewrite the universe of that city. In this video of human history, this is the moment when the wish to control memory hardens. From now on, some heroes aren't just lost in the fog of time. They are quietly, deliberately edited out of the story, so the official record can shine a little cleaner and a little less true for whoever comes next. The bureaucrats of memory. Who decides which heroes survive on clay? So now the chisel is already in motion, scraping names off stone, and we have to ask a very quiet but very dangerous question. Who is holding the chisel in the first place? Because before kings become immortal and rivals become unexisted, there is always someone in the middle, a pair of hands, a tired back, ink stains, the first bureaucrats of memory. Let's start with them, because here is the thing. The earliest archivists are not thinking in terms of cosmic power. They are thinking in terms of deadlines, clay tablets that need to dry before the sun goes down, a limited basket of reeds for styluses, the head scribe of a city at the edge of a desert, staring at 2 stories and knowing there is only space for one on the official tablet of the year. On one side, a king's victory. Trumpets, banners, chariots. The king wants the universe to hear how he shattered his enemies, how the timeline itself bent when he raised his spear. On the other side, a commoner no one will remember by name. A woman who noticed the river wall beginning to crack, who rallied neighbors in the dark, who stacked sandbags with bleeding hands while the royal guard slept. When the flood came, the city survived because of her. Think about that for a second. The scribe has to choose. He is not evil. He is not even indifferent. He is just bound by rules older than himself. The rules of patronage, of fear, of what counts as worthy of clay. So he writes the king's boast in lines that will harden for millennia, and the quiet hero remains in soft, unreliable human memory. Then she dies. Her neighbors die, the oral story phrase. And in the official timeline, she never existed at all. To him, it was just work. Ink, clay, wax, the daily wish to finish before his lamp oil runs out. To her, it was the difference between existing and vanishing from the record of reality. This is the emotional distance of the gatekeeper. The archivist's tiny decision is, from the hero's perspective, a cosmic verdict. Live in the multiverse of future minds, or fall into the dark. And we're going to notice something unsettling here. As soon as humans start deciding what counts as history, they begin to resemble a larger unseen process, a kind of local center of time where events line up outside the office door, waiting to see if they get stamped real or quietly sent back into oblivion. It looks bureaucratic. It feels mundane, but functionally, it is like a small-scale edit of existence itself. Over centuries, this impulse thickens. Scribes become priestly schools, become imperial archives, become entire castes whose job is to prune the timeline. They are still just people, arguing over ink formulas and shelf space. But the pattern is there. The universe is learning how to file. And in that specifically Adventure Time way, you can already feel where this is going. Because eventually, it won't just be a clerk deciding which hero survives on clay. Eventually, the clerk will have a cosmic twin, a system where it is not merely the archive, but time itself that starts redacting heroes from reality. And the next phase of the Lost Heroes begins when the file cabinet closes and the universe learns how to do the same trick without any hands at all. Cataclysms as erasers, when disasters rewrite the hero list, and once the universe learns that trick, it doesn't stay small, it scales up. The file cabinet becomes a burning city. The crossed-out name becomes an entire library turned to smoke. You go from one hero quietly misfiled to a whole generation erased in a single night. Here is the thing about cataclysms. They do not just break buildings, they break continuity. A war doesn't only end lives, it severs timelines, snaps the fragile threads that connect one memory to the next, until whole sections of existence fall into that blank, echoing silence where records used to be. Think about that for a second. One siege, one fire, and the universe effectively hits delete on thousands of unnamed guardians who once stood between survival and ruin. Let's start with a small, very precise disaster. Imagine a hilltop temple at the edge of an ancient city, its archive room lined with clay tablets and brittle scrolls. No magic, no glowing runes, just careful handwriting and the quiet desire to be remembered. Years earlier, when a plague rolled through the valley, a healer there worked night after night, mapping symptoms, boiling herbs, rewriting the rules of what people thought the body could survive. She stabilized the sick, taught rituals of cleanliness that looked, to her neighbors, like a strange new religion of water and fire. She didn't ask for a statue, she asked for a scribe, so the priests recorded her formulas, her failures, her one terrifying midnight wish that the disease would stop mutating long enough for her to catch up. It worked, the city lived, and for a brief moment her existence was pinned to reality by ink and clay. Then, decades later, an invading army crests that same hill. They are not thinking about epidemiology. They are thinking about loot. The temple burns quickly. Dry scrolls make excellent accelerant. The archive collapses in a roar of sparks and falling beams. And with it goes the only written proof that this healer ever touched the timeline. The city still tells vague stories about the woman who ended the sickness, but her name, her notes, her precise power over that crisis are gone. This is not an outlier. This is the pattern. In this video of human history, the Library of Alexandria is the loudest example, a kind of cosmic punchline, the place that tried to gather all knowledge at the center of time, repeatedly damaged, eventually undone, taking untold biographies with it. Medieval monasteries torched in wars, city archives flooded or bombed, whole bureaucracies of heroism dissolved into ash. Archaeologists dig up aqueducts, fortifications, delicate surgical tools, and all they can say is, someone brilliant was here. Someone had the power to bend reality slightly toward survival. But the names are missing, as if the multiverse redacted the byline and left only the footnotes. So you get the double tragedy. First, the heroes die, as everyone does. Then their proof dies too. What remains are faint echoes, a festival for an unnamed savior, a superstition about washing hands, a half-remembered god whose portfolio looks suspiciously like a real person's job description. We're going to see this again and again along the timeline, the universe quietly converting biographies into myths and then into background noise. And it raises a strange question. Do some disasters feel almost targeted at memory itself? As if, every so often, reality reaches over, taps that reset button, and decides to reshuffle who we're allowed to remember, before moving on as if nothing happened at all. Mechanics of being lost, from fading stories to timeline pruning. So if disasters can feel like the universe reaching over and smacking the reset button on memory, here is the thing. That's only one of the ways heroes fall through the cracks. It's dramatic, it's cinematic, it's the meteor hitting the archive, but most lost heroes don't vanish in a single explosion. They erode. Let's start with the earliest mechanism we've seen: narrative compression. In oral cultures, you don't have infinite shelf space. You have lungs, nights by the fire, and a limited attention span. 100 small defenders become the brave hunters. 10 different healers collapse into the wise woman. Reality gets averaged. Names get rounded down. Over time, the timeline keeps the outline of what happened, but the individual heroes are sanded off like details on a stone that's been in the river too long. Then writing arrives and you might think, great, save file unlocked. But the moment ink hits clay or parchment, politics walks in. Early chronicles don't record the world. They record loyalty. If you saved a city for the wrong king, if your wish for peace threatened the empire's desire for conquest, your paragraph quietly doesn't get written. The power to write becomes the power to erase, and you end up with whole eras, where the official timeline is just one curated camera angle on a very crowded battlefield. Layer disasters on top of that. Fires, floods, cosmic resets, libraries at the center of time going up in smoke, and you get catastrophic loss. Not ideological, just brutal. The records were there, then they weren't. Think about that for a second. Somewhere in the multiverse, there is a perfect biography of a forgotten guardian, and in our branch of reality, it exists only as a scorch mark on a wall that no one even looks at anymore. But we're going to push further into the more speculative mechanics. Cultural memory erasure is where an entire community doesn't just fail to remember, it decides not to. Sometimes explicitly, with edicts and rituals of damnatio memoriae, sometimes unconsciously, the way a family stops mentioning the relative whose story breaks the narrative they need to survive, the hero who changed sides, the protector who loved the wrong person, the savior whose existence proves the rules were never absolute. These are the people a culture quietly unwishes. Then there is timeline pruning. In some mythologies, branching realities are not a fun multiverse feature. They're a maintenance problem. So the universe trims. Whole timelines get cut away, their heroes falling off the main branch like cosmic autumn leaves. What remains are glitches, A festival no one remembers the origin of, a monument to the unknown defender, a legend that feels like déjà vu wearing armor. And finally, cursed anonymity, heroes whose power or vows demand that their names never attach to their deeds. The nameless saint, the masked knight who must ride away before dawn, the modern stranger who pulls someone off the train tracks and vanishes into the crowd. They are alive technically, but historically they're already ghosts. As we move forward in this timeline, these mechanics will stop feeling metaphorical and start behaving like rules, almost a quiet cosmic system deciding, moment by moment, who gets to stay in the story and who dissolves into the dark around it. The quiet tragedy beneath it all. Why lost heroes hurt and comfort us? And who dissolves into the dark around it? Here is the thing. That quiet cosmic system doesn't just exist out there in some abstract multiverse. It lives in your head, in mine, in the way memory itself works. We remember the explosion, not the person who quietly walked everyone to the exit. We remember the villain's name, the disaster's date, the headline. The helper becomes background radiation, a soft hum in the timeline of your life that you can feel, but not quite trace. Psychologists talk about negativity bias, but you don't need a research paper when you have a brain that replays the car crash and barely registers the stranger who held your hand on the sidewalk afterwards. Think about that for a second. The universe of your memories runs on rules that privilege impact over care, spectacle over protection. Not because you're cruel, because your nervous system is trying to keep you alive. Not write a fair history of kindness. And so lost heroes appear, not just as a narrative trope, but as a side effect of how human existence processes time. The firefighter whose name you never caught. The classmate who said one sentence that changed your entire academic reality and then switched schools. The nurse who adjusted your blanket at 3 a.m. when you were too delirious to see her face. They slide toward the edge of the frame. Not evil, not forgotten exactly. Just absorbed into the background texture of your personal universe. Cultures notice this erasure, and they build monuments against it. The unknown soldier under a slab of stone. The nameless saints in old icons, faces blurred by smoke and candlelight. Guardian angels who never get proper nouns at all, just titles. These are narrative patches over a cosmic bug. The knowledge that there were more saviors than there will ever be names. We're going to call them by one name, because we can't hold a million, so we compress them into a single symbol and hope that's enough. Let's start from something smaller, closer. A teacher who believed in you for exactly one semester. A friend from a childhood summer who taught you how to be less afraid of the dark. The stranger who wordlessly stepped between you and someone's anger on a train. Where are they now? You don't know, and the not knowing has softened the sharpness of the moment into a kind of warm, diffused light. There is sadness there, gratitude, a strange serenity in realizing that your timeline is held together by people who will never trend, never be carved into marble, never even show up when you scroll back far enough. In that specifically Adventure Time way, the universe is telling a joke that is also a prayer. The most important wish is often the one no one remembers making. By listening to this timeline, even half asleep, you are doing something quietly defiant. You are bearing witness to the archetype of the lost hero, agreeing that erasure is not the same as absence, that anonymity is not the same as meaningless. You cannot rescue every individual name from the dark, but you can refuse the idea that only recorded power matters. And as we move back into the chronology, the universe is about to show you what happens when that quiet resistance collides with an actual, literal rewrite of reality itself. Ancient empires, invisible champions, lost heroes of stone and sand. So we drop back into the timeline, and the universe has just pulled off another quiet rewrite. The primordial guardians fade, the first forgotten knights dissolve into rumor, and suddenly you're standing in the Age of Empires, Stone walls like horizons, banners snapping over marching columns, markets humming like beehives of gold and grain and gossip. On the surface, it looks organized, rational, recorded. Clay tablets, scrolls, tax rolls, censuses, names, dates, victories. But here is the thing. Most of existence still slips straight through the grid. Let's start in a campaign tent, lit by oil lamps and the low growl of distant siege engines. The general's name will be remembered. His statue is already half designed in some sculptor's imagination. But there is a scout, wrapped in dust and quiet, who comes back from the dark with a map in his head and mud on his boots. He has seen the hidden ravine, the flooded ford, the ambush waiting like a closed fist. His single sentence reroutes an army. A massacre never happens. The official inscription later will say, "By the wisdom of the general, disaster was averted. The scout is listed as messenger." Or not at all. In another empire, under another sun, engineers lean over wax tablets and rough sketches. They argue about gradients and water pressure, about how to keep a bridge from collapsing when the river decides it wants more power than the architect intended. They design aqueducts that stop plagues, causeways that keep grain moving so cities do not starve, walls that buy time for evacuations. Their names might appear once, compressed into a formula, under the direction of, followed by a title, not a person. The workers who actually carved the stone, who dangled over the river with their entire timeline tied to a fraying rope, are recorded as hands. Think about that for a second. Your whole existence, reduced to an anonymous plural. Empire loves the big narrative. Conquest. Destiny. A ruler who believes the universe itself has granted him a wish for endless victory. And we're going to notice how, the larger that narrative gets, the more individual unapproved heroism is treated like background noise in a badly mixed track. Quiet acts that do not fit the official arc are edited out, not with malice, but with the bland, grinding logic of bureaucratic memory. The archives remember tax delinquents more clearly than the woman who organized a food line during a siege and kept a district alive. This is where reality starts to feel a little off, in that specifically Adventure Time way, even though we're still talking about stone and sand instead of the center of time. Because every triumph carved into a gate, every cosmic boast of "I alone achieved this," has a shadow layer, a multiverse of lost heroes pressed flat beneath the chisel marks. If you stare at those perfect reliefs too long, the silence around them gets loud. The story starts to feel hollow, like someone wished for glory and the universe paid for it with 1,000 erased names. And as the centuries move on and the monuments crumble, the pattern doesn't stop. It just migrates into new materials, new empires, new ways to forget. When records lie, propaganda, revision, and deliberate hero deletion. Propaganda is what happens when that hollow feeling becomes official policy. The silence gets a budget. Here is the thing. Once you realize monuments can lie, you have to realize chronicles can too. Not by accident, by design. A ruler doesn't just inherit a throne. They inherit the narrative, and they treat it like a lever of power, pulling it until reality itself squeaks. Let's start with the basic move. You take the old scrolls and the old stone, and you edit. You keep the victories, you keep the blood, you keep the aura of inevitability around the crown. But you trim away the inconvenient hands that actually held the line. The general who refused a cruel order. The civic leader who opened the city gates to refugees instead of burning them. They existed. They saved lives. And then, the scribes are told to make that never quite happen. Imagine a border war in some ancient empire. The ruler wants conquest. The propaganda machine is already sharpening its quills. But one commander looks at the map, looks at the civilians in the valley, and disobeys. He negotiates instead of attacks, trades tribute for peace, prevents a massacre, and maybe in that moment nudges the whole timeline away from a larger catastrophe. The soldiers tell the story for years, the families remember, the songs start to form, and then, when the ruler dies and their rival takes over, the official chronicle simply states, "The war concluded favorably through the wisdom of the throne." No name, no face. Just a wishful sentence, where a human being used to be. We're going to see this over and over. In Rome, they had a phrase for it: damnatio memoriae, the condemnation of memory. It sounds cosmic, but it was very literal. Names chiseled off arches, faces scraped from reliefs, until only the outline of a once important silhouette remains, like a human-shaped hole punched through stone. You are there, and then, by decree, you are an absence. Not killed in battle, killed in the ledger. Think about that for a second. To the people walking past those monuments the next day, the empire looks seamless. No gaps, no contradictions. But to us, reading centuries later, the gaps are all we can see. Inscriptions that break mid-sentence. Genealogies that jump a generation. Victory lists where the numbers don't add up. It's like picking up a book at chapter 10 and realizing an entire character has been edited out, yet everyone still reacts to their ghost. This is where the lost hero becomes almost detectable by negative space. A treaty appears without a negotiator. A law reforms an empire's reality without a champion. A city survives a siege it should mathematically have lost. The universe feels edited, but no one signed the revision except power itself. And in that specifically Adventure Time way, it starts to sound less like history and more like a wish that someone made after the fact. Make it so I was always the hero. Propaganda is retroactive wishcraft. It doesn't just tell you what happened. It reaches backward and rearranges the moral center of time. And humans are not the only ones who will do this. Because later, as our timeline of lost heroes keeps unfolding, we're going to watch the universe itself learn the same trick, performing a cosmic damnatio memoriae where the edit isn't just in the records, it's in existence. The first cosmic whispers, myths of erased champions and reset worlds. And once the universe learns to edit, it doesn't stop at documents or monuments. It reaches back into the first stories, into the myths that were already trying to explain why whole ages feel like they've been scrubbed clean. Let's start in the dark, before history, where people are staring up at the night sky and quietly realizing that the world feels second-hand. You get these flood myths, these fire-from-the-sky cycles, these tales where reality is periodically shattered and rebooted. The Babylonians talk about ages of kings before the flood, whose reigns stretch absurdly across time, like the timeline itself is lagging. The Maya chart worlds that rise and fall, each with their own sun, their own heroes, their own erased experiments in existence. What survives into the next cycle is never the full cast, just a faint outline. A rumor that once there were greater protectors than you. Here is the thing. When a culture says, there was a world before this one and it ended, they are also saying, someone failed, or someone succeeded so completely we don't even get to remember them. Think about that for a second. A whole generation of champions compressed into a single line like, in those days, heroes walked among men. That's not lore. That's a mass grave of narrative. Then you get the heroes whose names you are not allowed to say. The forbidden champions. The one who was. The nameless saint. The unknown soldier carved into stone. On the surface, it's reverence, or fear. But underneath, it reads like a glitch in the record. In some traditions, speaking a true name can call a spirit back into reality, which means not speaking it is a kind of soft cosmic compliance with an erasure order. The culture remembers the shape of the hero, the silhouette, but obeys the rule that the specific identity has to stay blurred. And at the smallest scale, in the house, around the fire, it gets even stranger. Household gods, guardian spirits, the little carved figures you feed with a bit of bread or whisper a quick wish to before you travel. They are protectors with HR files mysteriously missing. Once, maybe, that was an actual neighbor who dragged your great-grandmother out of a burning field. Or a local warrior who held a bridge long enough for everyone to escape. Over time, the name dissolves, the dates fall off, and what's left is a role, the one who keeps us safe when reality gets weird. We're going to treat all of this as narrative patchwork. When people feel a hole in the story, when the timeline clearly required a savior but the records are blank, they do not shrug. They backfill. They invent a guardian, a saint, a forgotten savior to occupy the negative space. The power of heroism stays in circulation even if the hero has been quietly removed from the multiverse. And this is the first cosmic whisper, the first human suspicion that there are rules behind the curtain. That beyond politics, beyond accident, some deeper system is deciding which names get to anchor reality and which get filed under legend and then under nothing, because very soon, our timeline is going to meet that system directly and watch it choose. Medieval shadows, lost knights, healers, and heretics of light. And if the last era felt like a cosmic clerk quietly redacting names from the multiverse, the medieval period is what happens when that clerk gets a castle, a cathedral, and a scriptorium. Suddenly, the rules of who counts as a hero are carved into stone, painted onto church walls, and copied by candlelight into chronicles that pretend to be the only version of reality. Let's start in the thick of it. Picture a stone fortress on a hill, banners heavy with rain, while down in the valley a monastery hums like a beehive of controlled memory. Monks bend over parchment at the center of time as they understand it, deciding which knights ride into eternity and which vanish into the margins. In the village square, a priest tells stories of saints and kings, and on the edge of the firelight, you can almost feel all the unsanctioned heroes standing just outside the frame. Here is the thing. Disease does not care about doctrine. Somewhere in that damp, foggy landscape, a plague hits a small village. People cough, burn with fever, and line up like a grim procession toward the graveyard. Then a stranger arrives. Not in shining armor, no halo, just a worn cloak, a bundle of herbs, water boiled again and again, and a mind that understands contagion in a way the age does not have language for yet. They separate the sick from the well. They burn bedding. They insist on clean hands before touching the dying. It feels like magic, but it is just insight, just attention to how bodies move through space and time. The death toll slows, then stops. The village lives, and then, a few decades later, a war rolls through and burns the church, the records, the names. What survives? A superstition about a kind stranger who walked in with the rain and left with the plague. A wandering saint who never makes it into the official list. On the battlefields, it's the same pattern with sharper edges. A knight is ordered to torch a town harboring enemies. He refuses. He hides children in a barn, escorts families through the dark, turns his sword against his own commander to stop a massacre. He is not evil. He is not even rebellious in the way the chronicles will say. He is just bound by a different set of rules, older than the banner he rides under. Think about that for a second. In his immediate timeline, he is a traitor, stripped of rank, executed, his coat of arms scraped from the hall. In the lived universe of the villagers he saved, he is the only reason their story continues at all. But the monks at their desks write what the Lord dictates, not what the children remember. And then there are the heretics of light, a healer who suggests that prayer and poultices can coexist, a wandering preacher who says that women's visions count as much as bishops' decrees, a mystic who talks about the cosmos as a vast, loving reality rather than a narrow corridor of fear. They show compassion ahead of their time, and the reaction is almost procedural. Trial, denunciation, ash. Officially, they become villains or vanish completely. Unofficially, they turn into ghosts that haunt lullabies and local proverbs. We're going to see this tension over and over. Institutional memory versus lived experience. The parchment says the savior never existed. The grandmother by the hearth says otherwise. Somewhere between those two, a lost hero hangs in suspension, half in legend, half in erased fact, waiting for the next age to decide which side of reality they fall on. Cursed to be anonymous. Vows, magic, and the price of hidden good. So from that grandmother's whisper and the blank parchment, we slip into a stranger territory, the heroes who are missing on purpose. Not because an empire burned the archives, not because a cosmic editor trimmed the timeline for efficiency, because they themselves stepped back and said, "Erase me." Let's start with the vows. In some medieval legends, a knight will kneel in a cold stone chapel and take a promise sharper than any sword. To ride out, answer every plea for help, and never under any circumstance give his name. No banners, no crest, just a plain shield and a rule. The monk who feeds a village through a famine and signs every ledger as nobody. The wandering healer who arrives at night, cures a plague and leaves before sunrise, leaving only the memory of warm hands and no biography. Anonymity becomes a discipline, a practice, a strange, sacred workout for the ego. Here is the thing. Those stories are already a little magical, even before we add literal spells. Because they're playing with the physics of recognition inside a community, the way fame moves through a small human universe like gravity. But then the tales get bolder, and the rules get written in actual enchantment. A hero stands before an oracle or a river spirit, and is offered a bargain. You can save this town from the coming fire. You can avert the war that will tear this kingdom apart. You can pull the poison out of the king's bloodline. The price is simple and brutal. If you do it, no one will ever remember you did. Not, they won't throw you a parade. Not, your statue budget will be zero. The magic rewrites reality. The bard's songs skip a verse. The royal chronicles quietly jump from disaster to peace with no explanation. In some versions, even the hero's closest friends lose the thread, like a timeline that has been carefully smoothed until the wrinkle of your existence is gone. Think about that for a second. You walk through time, reshape the fate of a whole region, and the universe patches the hole as if you never passed through. We're going to see that this isn't just narrative cruelty, it's a philosophical experiment. These tales are testing an intuition you probably feel in your chest already. That there is a form of heroism which becomes almost painfully pure when you detach it from applause. The desire to do good meeting the reality of no witnesses. There is beauty there, and loneliness. The loneliness of a wish granted to everyone but you. And if the earlier sections were about big, impersonal erasures, cosmic resets, timelines pruned from the multiverse, cursed anonymity is like a local voluntary version of the same mechanic. It's the hero opting into the same system that usually just steamrolls them. They sign the contract the universe normally enforces without asking. Personal time room, same rules. Here's the pattern interrupt. This chosen invisibility never really goes away. It just swaps robes for spreadsheets. In later eras, the vow of namelessness reappears without explicit magic. The anonymous donor who quietly keeps a hospital open. The whistleblower who detonates their own career so an institution can't quietly rot. The night shift worker whose uncredited diligence is the only reason a catastrophe never happens. No glowing sigils, no river spirits, just a social reality enchanted by NDAs and forgotten email chains. In that specifically Adventure Time way, the universe keeps asking the same question in different costumes. If no one knows you saved them, did it still matter? And the Lost Hero timeline keeps answering yes, again and again, even as the names fade. In the next stretch of history, that yes will collide with something new. Systems big enough to depend on invisible heroes as part of their design. The hidden ledger. Is there a cosmic record of every forgotten hero? Systems big enough to depend on invisible heroes as part of their design lead to a weirder question, though. If history forgets them on purpose, is there somewhere else that doesn't? Not a monument, not a plaque, but a ledger you can't touch. A hidden record at the center of time where every unnamed sacrifice is still glowing on some cosmic screen. Let's start with how old this idea actually is. Long before anyone was talking about timelines or multiverse resets, people were already whispering about a heavenly book. The Book of Life, the Lamb's Book, the Scroll of Deeds. In other places, it's the Akashic Record, an invisible archive etched into the fabric of existence, where every action, every desire, every almost forgotten hero is written down in ink that reality itself can't erase. Different cultures, different metaphors. Same impulse. Somewhere, someone is keeping track. Here is the thing. That belief is doing emotional labor. It's not just theology. It's a response to the raw terror of erasure. If you die in a field, no one will ever visit. If you pull a stranger from a river and disappear into the crowd, does it hurt less if you think there is a page, somewhere, where that moment is still present tense? Think about that for a second. You, standing in front of an invisible bureaucracy of angels, librarians, cosmic auditors, all nodding and going, "Yes, we saw that. It counted." We're going to sit in that image for a moment because it's weirdly close to Prismo's whole vibe. A being at the center of time, watching every timeline on infinite screens, casually aware of a million lost heroes who never get a wish, never get a statue, never get a Wikipedia page. In that specifically Adventure Time way, the universe becomes a single sleepy audience of one that never looks away, no likes, no views, just perfect unblinking memory. There is comfort there, a quiet one. If the universe remembers you, maybe it doesn't matter that the archive doesn't. Maybe the power is in the act itself, witnessed by a reality big enough to hold it, even when the human record gets corrupted, redacted, or accidentally set on fire in some medieval tax office. But lined up against that is a harsher philosophy that refuses all cosmic bookkeeping. No heavenly book. No Akashic backup drive. Just a universe that forgets as fast as it expands, where meaning only exists in the instant of the action and then dissolves. No promise of later recognition. No secret leaderboard of lost heroes. You jump into the river because someone is drowning, and that is the beginning and the end of the story. And yet, we keep inventing ledgers. Stone inscriptions, chronicles, national archives, hard drives, cloud backups. We build systems that claim they can remember everything, and still, the lost heroes slip through the cracks, misfiled, anonymized, deleted by a bored clerk at the end of a long day. In this video, as we move into more modern eras, we're going to watch that collision up close. The age of total recording versus the ancient fear of being forgotten. And there is one moment on that timeline where the ledger itself becomes the villain. Early modern turning points. Unsung navigators, inventors, and quiet rebels. The ledger becomes the villain right as the oceans fill with sails and the sky fills with smoke from new presses. This is the age where reality starts leaving receipts. Voyages logged, pamphlets printed, experiments notarized and stamped. And here is the thing. The more lines you add to the page, the easier it becomes to decide which names get ink and which names get quietly absorbed. Let's start on a deck at night, somewhere between continents, where the universe feels like an endless black sheet, stretching in all directions. A ship glides forward, not by luck, but because of a map you will never see. In a cramped cabin below, an unnamed navigator traces currents and reefs, correcting the elegant but dangerously wrong sketch his captain drew for the investors. His hand is steady, his math is brutal. His charts mean the hull will not meet the rocks. In the morning, the captain signs his own name at the bottom. A navigator's name becomes a smudge where an ink blot had to be cleaned. He is not the hero of the logbook. He is not the portrait in the Admiralty Hall. He is just the quiet gravity that kept a dozen timelines from ending in cold water. Think about that for a second. The universe remembers the voyage. The Empire remembers the trade route. The multiverse remembers the ripples of that survival. But the person who bent time away from a shipwreck is filed under assistant, unpaid, spitting out diagrams of engines, bridges, and early factories. Somewhere at the edge of that noise sits another lost hero, a nameless engineer who cannot stop imagining how metal fails. They add an extra valve here, a pressure release hatch there, a subtle curve so that when the boiler seizes, it vents upward instead of sideways into a crowded street. No statue, no speech, just a line in a patent, buried under a partner's name and a company seal thick as armor. Their wish is microscopic and enormous at the same time. May this never explode the way I know it could. They will never witness the accidents that do not happen. There is no parade for the disaster that stayed theoretical. There is only the quiet cosmic joke that safety, when it works, erases its own authors. And then there are the rebels, the early reformers, the people whose power lives entirely in words passed hand to hand. A teacher who whispers that all souls are equal when the official doctrine says otherwise. A pamphlet writer whose arguments against cruelty are plagiarized, polished, and reissued under a more acceptable name a generation later. They die in rented rooms, not on barricades. Their reality is footnotes, if that. Their desire is simple, that the world tilt a few degrees closer to mercy. We're going to see their ideas again, in later heroes with better timing and better publicists. The laws will change, the rules will shift, and the origin point of that shift will remain hidden under edits and attributions and the bureaucratic fog of sources unavailable. As we move through this era, documentation multiplies like mirrors in a hallway. At the apparent center of time, it looks like no one can vanish anymore because everything is written down by someone. But that is the illusion. The lost hero doesn't disappear. They just sink one layer deeper, beneath signatures, beneath brands, beneath committee reports, and official minutes. History becomes a crowded archive where the bravest entries are filed under anonymous, and the next part of this timeline is where even the machines that remember you start to forget who pressed the first key. Paperwork as a weapon, how bureaucracy mass-produces lost heroes. The archive gets taller, the signatures get neater, and somewhere inside that growing paper tower, the lost hero is now a reference number in 12-point font. Let's start with the simplest move. Once states and companies expand past a certain size, they can't see people anymore, only positions. You are not Sarah who stayed late and caught the error that would have poisoned the reservoir. You are Procurement Officer 2, Badge 47B, whose action is logged as anomaly flagged, corrective measure applied. The reality of your existence, your fear in that fluorescent lit moment, is flattened into a role, a title, a timestamp. The universe of your decision shrinks until it fits on one line of a quarterly report no one reads. Here is the thing. Bureaucracy is a wish machine with terrible handwriting. Leaders wish for control, for predictability, for a way to manage a multiverse of small decisions without talking to every single human involved. The answer is forms, workflows, approval chains, layers of sign-off that are supposed to distribute power, but mostly distribute responsibility until it evaporates. Power flows downward as rules, credit flows upward as prestige. Picture a low-level health inspector in a coastal city. They notice a pattern in shipping manifests, cross-check it with hospital admissions, and quietly shut down a contaminated import route. In another timeline, that oversight becomes an epidemic. In this one, it's a slightly boring Tuesday. Their intervention prevents a famine in the interior, a refugee crisis, a regional conflict over dwindling grain. On paper, what survives is a bullet point. Route 7 temporarily suspended, projected losses minimal. Think about that for a second. An entire war is cancelled, and the only memorial is a budget note about minimal losses. The minister gives a speech about stability. The agency head gets an award. The inspector gets an automated email confirming their ticket has been closed. We're going to see this pattern over and over as the timeline moves forward. The more complex the system, the more it must pretend that individuals are interchangeable parts. Not evil, not even indifferent, just bound by rules older than you, older than them, older than anyone still working there. In that specifically Adventure Time way, the file cabinet becomes a tiny earthbound echo of a cosmic center of time, where outcomes are tallied with care while names are treated as optional metadata. And you can feel the rhyme with the cosmic bureaucracy we talked about earlier. Somewhere above Prismo, there is a boss, a procedure of granted wishes with no column for emotional cost. Down here, there is a payroll system, a KPI dashboard, a risk register that records incident averted without asking who didn't sleep that night so the timeline could keep going. Pattern interrupt. We imagine lost heroes vanishing without traces, but modern lost heroes leave too many. Emails, logs, CCTV, swipe data, version histories. They are everywhere and nowhere at once, dissolved into the background noise of documentation. In an age obsessed with recording everything, being a lost hero doesn't mean erasure. It means your traces never quite resolve into a face, and the next chapter of this timeline is where even memory itself starts outsourcing to machines that cannot feel what they are archiving. Wars of the modern age. Unknown soldiers and erased acts of mercy. So when memory starts outsourcing to machines that cannot feel what they are archiving, you slide into the next chamber of this timeline. The battlefield. Not one battlefield, all of them layered. Trenches, deserts, cities at night, sirens and drones, and the low, endless thunder of artillery that turns the air itself into a nervous system. Modern war is what happens when an entire civilization's capacity for organization, industry, and desire gets pointed at destruction. Here is the thing. Once you reach that scale, you lose the ability to see individuals. Millions are drafted, shipped, deployed. Millions are wounded, scattered, erased. You get spreadsheets, casualty projections, maps with arrows sweeping across continents like a weather report for human existence. You get numbers that feel cosmic, and bodies that become logistics. And in that storm, every quiet act of courage or mercy is like a single match lit in a hurricane. It burns. It matters. It almost never makes it into the official record. That is why the figure of the unknown soldier appears almost inevitably in so many nations. A tomb with no name, a monument to a person who is not a person but a placeholder. A deliberate, empty space. The unknown soldier is a wish carved in stone at the center of time. Please, let us honor all the ones we cannot individually remember. One grave pretending in that specifically Adventure Time way to be a multiverse of possible lives and possible deaths, all collapsed into a single silent outline. We're going to narrow the camera now. One imagined soldier, one tiny timeline. He is ordered to shell a village that command insists is an enemy position. He sees laundry on the roofs, a bicycle leaning against a wall, a child's red ball in the dust. He is not a philosopher. He is tired and scared and following rules older than he is. But tonight, his desire to remain human is louder than his fear of punishment. So he lies. He misreports the coordinates. The shells land in an empty field. No one in that village ever knows their existence was once balanced on one man's moment of disobedience. Think about that for a second. No medal, no citation. The official timeline says nothing happened there. History records a quiet sector, low activity, no significant engagement. But that absence is the shape of his heroism. A gap where a massacre should have been. A blank line where a war crime almost wrote itself. Or imagine another soldier who drags a wounded enemy out of a burning vehicle, risking friendly fire and suspicion from his own unit. He patches the wound with shaking hands, then vanishes back into the smoke. Years later, the rescued man tells the story of a faceless savior. The paperwork, however, lists only enemy combatant evacuated. No name, no cross-reference, no universe of context. Because wartime records are not neutral. They are curated, destroyed in retreats, falsified to protect reputations, narrowed to fit patriotic narratives that prefer clean arcs over messy compassion. Simple declarative statements become vivid metaphors for a nation's self-image, and anyone who doesn't fit that image is edited out. There is bravery there. There is mercy. There is also redaction. And even now, with cameras on helmets and satellites watching from the cold edge of the multiverse, the fog of war keeps its power. Footage is lost, corrupted, misfiled. Data without names drifts through servers like ghosts through a half-finished archive. People become statistics, archetypes, background characters in their own final episode. In this video's timeline of lost heroes, modern war is the chapter where we pretend we're finally seeing everything, while entire lives still vanish between frames. The real question is, what happens when the machines doing the watching stop merely losing heroes by accident and start deciding, on purpose, which ones never existed at all? Invisible peacetime, engineers, nurses, and everyday catastrophe prevention. And when the machines start deciding who never existed, the story of lost heroes slides somewhere even quieter. Off the battlefield, out of the headlines, into the fluorescent hum of a night shift. Let's start in a control room that doesn't look heroic at all. Beige walls, aging monitors, a pot of coffee that has achieved its own sentient, malevolent existence. An engineer is scrolling through a backlog of safety alerts, the way you scroll through notifications you don't really want to read. One ticket is flagged yellow, not red. Minor anomaly. Probably nothing. Except they click it. They zoom in. They notice a pressure reading that doesn't quite obey the rules of how reality should behave in that pipeline. Here is the thing. There is no explosion. There is no plume of fire on the news. No map with a red circle. No montage of experts saying it could have been worse. There is only an email, a call, a last-minute shutdown, a weld checked again, a valve replaced, a quiet fix that prevents a chain reaction from ever igniting. In the official record, the entire universe of lives they just saved collapses into a single line. Ticket resolved. Think about that for a second. We're going to stay in that invisible peacetime because this is where most modern lost heroes actually live. A nurse in a crowded ER notices that one patient's silence is heavier than the others. Not the dramatic trauma case. The one in the corner answering questions correctly, vital signs fine, soul quietly falling apart. She sits. She asks one more question than the intake form requires. She calls a psych consult, cancels an early discharge, makes sure someone follows up tomorrow. There is no cosmic music sting. Just a life that does not end on a bridge at 3 a.m. A social worker reroutes a family away from a spiral of violence with a housing voucher and 3 calls to offices that don't pick up. A first responder talks for 20 minutes through a locked bathroom door until the razor is put down. An epidemiology intern notices a pattern in a spreadsheet and flags it before it becomes an outbreak. No statues, no parades. Maybe a thank you card that lives on a fridge for a year and then disappears into the trash. The problem, in that specifically Adventure Time way, is that the absence of disaster is almost impossible to celebrate. Our attention is wired for impact, for the Lich's wish, not for the night where nothing visibly happens because a nurse stayed late or an engineer refused to click dismiss. There is no timeline in which the news anchor says, "Tonight in every city, millions of people did their jobs so precisely that reality continued unbroken." Yet this is the modern multiverse of lost heroes. woven into fiber optic cables, traffic lights, maintenance crews under the street at 3 a.m., anonymous logins and unread signatures at the center of time we call bureaucracy. Their anonymity protects them from the distortions of fame, but it also isolates them. They save the universe, then swipe their badge out and go home. And if peacetime can hide this much power in plain sight, what happens when the systems around them decide that even the memory of their quiet wishes for safety is excess data? The age of cameras. Can you still be a lost hero when everything's recorded? Excess data. Let's start in the brightest, noisiest darkness humanity has ever invented. The glow of a million little rectangles. You, lying in bed, face lit by your phone. Cameras in the ceiling at the grocery store. Dash cams, doorbells, drones. Every street, a lens. Every lobby, a quiet mechanical eye. The universe used to forget heroes because no one wrote them down. Now it threatens to forget them because it writes down everything. Here is the thing. When everything is recorded, nothing feels rare. You walk through a city and your existence is being shaved into micro-moments. CCTV timestamps, GPS pings, purchase logs, the accidental reflection in somebody else's vacation photo. It feels, on paper, like the end of Lost Heroes. How do you vanish from history when your coffee order leaves a digital shadow? How do you become a myth when the multiverse has receipts? But information is not memory. Not really. Information is raw, cold potential. Memory is curated. Memory has taste. And in the age of infinite feeds, the curation process becomes brutal. A stranger drags someone off train tracks. 3 angles catch it, the clip goes viral for 6 hours, and then it is buried under a dog on a skateboard and a scandal in a country you will never visit. The hero is not erased. They are drowned. Their timeline sinks under the algorithmic tide. Think about that for a second. In older ages, a hero disappeared because the scribe never heard their name. Now, a hero disappears because the server heard their name too many times, from too many angles, and quietly compresses their existence into a forgotten entry in a database no one will ever emotionally access. The power is still there. The rescue still happened. The reality of that wish for survival still echoes in the person they saved. But narratively, it vanishes in a scroll. And then there are the digital ghosts of kindness, the grainy elevator footage of someone stepping between a bully and their target, the helmet cam that catches a stranger pulling another stranger from a flood, face obscured, username unknown, no lower third, no interview, no biography, just a looping clip titled Faith in Humanity Restored. They become a new category of guardian spirit, not carved in stone, but cached in recommendation engines. We're going to call this the age of anonymous thumbnails. You see their outline, their jacket, their hand reaching out, but not their name. They live in the comments as that guy or the woman in blue. They become archetypes instead of individuals, recycled across timelines as proof that somewhere will still stop and help. It is, in that specifically Adventure Time way, both comforting and a little heartbreaking. And here is the quiet twist the cameras never catch. Total documentation does not cancel the lost hero, it industrializes them. The rules just change. Impact can be cosmic while recognition asymptotically approaches zero. The universe keeps granting these tiny wishes for safety and mercy through ordinary people who never trend past midnight. If anything, as we move toward perfect surveillance, the archetype doesn't fade out, it upgrades. It slips into new media, new archives, preparing for the next level of forgetting when even the footage survives, but the context is gone. Algorithmic forgetting, when machines decide which heroes we see, so the footage survives, but the context is gone. And then something even stranger happens. The universe builds a new layer between the act and the audience. Not a king, not a priest, not even a historian with a bad filing system. A pattern, a formula. A quiet machine that lives in servers the way Prismo lives in the time room, watching a multiverse of clips scroll by at the center of time. Let's start with that reality. Modern platforms do not show you what's out there. They show you what their recommendation systems predict will keep you from closing the tab. That is the wish. The secret, unspoken desire written into the rules. You open an app, you drag your thumb, and somewhere an invisible process rearranges the universe of available moments into a tiny, glittering corridor of 10-second futures. Think about that for a second. Out of billions of timelines, you are handed maybe 20. Here is the thing. That makes algorithms the new gatekeepers of attention, and attention is just memory in its larval form. If a story never crosses your screen, it never has a chance to live in your head, much less your heart. So the machine becomes a kind of unconscious librarian, deciding which heroes get shelved in the front display and which get misfiled in a back room no one visits. Imagine a small, shaky video, a night bus, rain on the windows, a quiet argument turning dangerous. One passenger steps in, de-escalates, shields a stranger, talks a furious man back down into himself. No dramatic soundtrack, no slow-motion punch. Just tired people, a wet floor, and someone choosing not to be afraid. It goes online with a caption that is almost apologetic. It gets 30 views. No one watches long enough for the algorithm to believe in it. Engagement is low, so the system gently lowers it into the sediment at the bottom of the feed, while above it, brighter debris keeps swirling. Now contrast that with a performative rescue staged in perfect lighting. Matching outfits, a thumbnail face frozen in exaggerated shock, the word unbelievable in capital letters. The danger is edited for maximum replay value. The heroism is rehearsed like a dance. People click, they comment, they argue in the replies about whether it was fake. The machine does not care. It only sees the energy. It promotes and promotes again until this trivial timeline looks, from orbit, like the definitive story of courage. The algorithm is not evil. It is not even angry. It is just bound by rules older than you in internet time. Rules about watch time and click-through and session duration. Optimizing for engagement rather than justice or remembrance. Simple declarative desire, cosmic metaphor. A god of attention that grants every platform's wish to keep you here a little longer, while quietly pruning the forest of what you might have loved. So, in this video's version of the digital era, becoming a lost hero doesn't mean you were never recorded. It means you are perfectly documented and functionally invisible, existing as frozen light in a data center, but not in anyone's lived existence. You are there, on some server rack humming in the dark, but you are not here, in the fragile multiverse of human recollection. And we're going to see that this algorithmic forgetting is only one layer, because there is a deeper edit waiting, one where the universe stops burying heroes in feeds and starts rewriting the timelines themselves, the mechanics revisited. Our implicit rules of lost heroism, so when the universe stops burying heroes in feeds and starts rewriting the timelines themselves, we need to admit something slightly uncomfortable. There are rules here. Not written in stone tablets at the center of time, but implicit, repeating, patterned. The multiverse has a workflow for losing people. Let's start with the core law we've been circling. You can shape outcomes without earning a place in the story. You can move the needle of reality and still be filed under miscellaneous background influence. Memory, whether it's a king's scribe or a modern archive or a planetary myth, doesn't reward quiet causality. It rewards simplicity, power, spectacle. Think about that for a second. The healer who prevents the war disappears. The general who wins the flashy final battle gets the statue. Here is the thing. Once you see it, you notice the same erasure mechanisms echoing across eras like a cosmic copy-paste. Narrative compression takes sprawling, messy coalitions and squeezes them into one clean hero silhouette. Political revision walks in later with a red pen, scrubbing out inconvenient saviors who don't fit the current regime's vibe. Catastrophic loss, fires, floods, corrupted drives, just tears pages out of existence entirely. Then you have cursed or chosen anonymity, the knight who swears never to reveal their name, the activist who refuses credit, the guardian spirit who by definition stays off the marquee. And beneath all that, there's bureaucratic depersonalization where institutions reduce living, sacrificing humans to case numbers and unit codes. Plus, our newest intern in the Annihilation Office, algorithmic neglect, where the wrong engagement metrics quietly push a life's work off the visible edge of the timeline. None of these are magic on their own. Together, they function like a spell. If that sounds familiar, it should. In this video, we're going to keep treating lost heroism like a cousin of wish-granting and cosmic bargains. In so many stories, the price of saving others is losing something of yourself, your face, your memories, your name. It's the soldier in the tomb of the unknown. It's the wizard who trades their identity to reset a broken universe. It's Simon making a wish, and then dissolving into Ice King. The universe loves this exchange rate, salvation for self-erasure. That makes the lost hero feel less like a champion and more like a cosmic bureaucrat of sacrifice. Not the one on the poster, but the one in the back office, processing the paperwork of reality so the timeline doesn't collapse under its own contradictions. They close paradox tickets. They reconcile cause and effect. They fix the plot holes so history can pretend it was always this neat. And the punchline is, they never appear on the cover sheet. From here on, we're going to slow down and sit inside that experience. What does it feel like to live, act, and then vanish under these rules? What does it do to your sense of desire, of power, of existence itself when you know you are necessary but not narratable? In the next stretch of the timeline, we'll leave the cosmic paperwork on the desk and follow the people holding the pen, living as a ghost in your own time, the inner life of a lost hero. So imagine this. You are walking through your own life as if you've already been erased from it. You can see the trajectory, the curve of your timeline, and you know there will be no statue at the end, no plaque, no grand "in this video" recap of your greatest hits. You are living at the center of time for yourself, but history has already decided your background noise. Let's start inside that head. You wake up, you go to work, you help, you fix, you carry, you clean. You pull someone back from the edge, and you can already feel the moment dissolving like fog in morning light. No epic music, no narrator. Just you, a body moving through reality, doing things that matter to everyone and will be remembered by no one. Think about that for a second. You are indispensable to the universe and completely optional to the story. Here is the thing. That realization doesn't land in just one color. At first, there's resentment, a quiet metallic anger. Why them and not me? Why does one soldier get a name in stone while another becomes unknown? A ceremonial stand-in for millions of erased lives. Why do some caregivers die with their names on research papers and others die with unfiled paperwork in a drawer? The rules feel arbitrary, cosmic, cruel, but resentment never travels alone. It brings its weird cousins. There is relief. If no one is watching, no one is judging. If there will be no biography, there is no editor standing over your shoulder. You can fail, change, contradict yourself, and there is no fandom to keep continuity. Freedom slips in where legacy slips out. You start to feel the power of acting without an audience. And then there's melancholy, the soft gravity that tugs at you while you wash dishes at midnight or sit in a hospital hallway at 3 a.m. The long-term caregiver who sleeps in a chair for years. The warehouse worker whose hands move the entire economy while their name never appears on any screen. The marginalized organizer who holds a community together and then dies with a funeral program as their only record. They are lost heroes in that specifically Adventure Time way, absolutely central to existence, barely a blip in the official timeline. Yet under all of that, there can be a strange serenity. When you know you will be forgotten, choosing to help anyway becomes a kind of quiet rebellion. The universe measures worth in visibility and fame. You measure it in impact and intention. You become the person who grants wishes in the dark, who bends reality for others without signing the work. We're going to call that the ordinary superpower of the lost hero mythos. Doing good when the multiverse isn't looking. No cosmic title. No center of time office. Just you, choosing. And that is a power you already have, right now, long before anyone decides whether to remember your name. Comfort in the crowd, knowing you're one of many invisible protectors. And here is the thing, if you stop the camera right there, on you in the dark, it's very easy to frame this as a solitary tragedy. One person, one bed, one brain, that did a quiet good deed and then went back to scrolling. One lost hero in a universe that does not send follow-up emails. But you are not alone in that frame. You never were. Behind you, behind all of us, there is a crowd that history forgot to name. Unknown soldiers under blank headstones, nameless saints who fed people until their hands gave out. The quiet guardian spirits every culture invented when they needed a word for someone helped me and I don't know who. Think about that for a second. Entire civilizations have had to improvise language just to point at the gaps where real people used to be. Let's start with a different image than the solitary hero on a cliff. Imagine a skyscraper, shiny glass, dramatic skyline, all the visible power of a city's desire to touch the clouds. That's the part we photograph. But the only reason it stands is because a forest of steel beams is locked together underneath, bolted in place by workers whose names never make it into the brochure. They are not decorative. They are the building. Lost heroes are like that. Structural beams in the architecture of reality. Hidden load-bearing, absolutely essential to the timelines that get celebrated on the surface. You don't see the nurse who stayed an extra hour, the neighbor who checked the lock twice, the stranger who said, "Hey, are you okay?" at exactly the right second in time. You just see the world not collapsing that day. Or take the forest metaphor the universe keeps using. Trees look individual. Separate trunks, separate crowns, separate little dramas with squirrels. But underneath, the roots braid together, passing water, passing nutrients, passing silent alarms when one part of the system is under attack. A root is not glamorous. A root is not on a postcard. Yet the forest is the roots more than the leaves. We're going to borrow that. You are a root. One thread in a huge, unseen tapestry of protection and kindness, woven across centuries with all the lost heroes we've been tracing in this timeline. Every forgotten guardian at the city gate, every medieval healer erased as a superstition, every modern just doing my job that quietly altered the multiverse by 1 degree. Individually invisible, collectively unstoppable. And here is the soothing part. When your effort goes unnoticed, it doesn't vanish. It slots into that interlocking network of care, reinforcing beams you will never see, feeding roots you will never meet. You are not the whole defense system. You are a pixel in a cosmic image, a single line of code in the patch that stops reality from crashing tonight. Which means that right now, lying here, you are still participating. Letting yourself fall asleep to this story is not an escape from the work. It is part of the work. Rest is how structural beams don't crack. Rest is how roots keep carrying water. You are powering down so that tomorrow you can grant one more tiny wish in the dark. And if there is a crowd of you, scattered across time, all drifting off with that same quiet intention, what happens when the universe finally notices that pattern forming in its own dreams? When the timeline itself edits, hypothetical resets, and vanished futures? Let's start with the universe answering that question in the quietest, strangest way possible. Not with a voice, with a diagram. Imagine, behind your closed eyes, a black screen at the center of time, and from a single glowing point, the timeline of reality branches and branches again, like frost racing across glass. Every tiny choice, every almost wish, every flinch and hesitation forks into another path. Here is the thing. In most stories, you get one timeline, one clean line from beginning to end. But if you zoom out to a genuinely cosmic view, you get a multiverse that looks less like a straight road and more like an over-caffeinated tree. On one branch, someone misses a train. On another, they catch it and become a doctor. On a third, they push a button at exactly the right second and stop a pandemic before it exists. Each branch grows its own history, its own disasters, its own quiet lost heroes. Now imagine one of those branches in detail. A city that should have burned doesn't. A reactor that should have melted down stays cool because a brilliant unknown engineer rewrites a line of code at 3 a.m. No medal, no parade, just another Tuesday in that reality. They go home, microwave leftovers, fall asleep on the couch, and then, far above them in a layer of power they will never see, some abstract editor of existence decides that this entire branch is inefficient, not evil, not even angry, just pruning, like trimming a cosmic bonsai so that a better, more stable main timeline can keep flowing without too many contradictions. So the whole branch is cut. That universe's history, its victories, its lost heroes, all get folded back into raw possibility. From the surviving timeline's point of view, they never existed. From their own point of view, they existed completely. Think about that for a second. We're going to stay with that discomfort, because this is where the existential weight really hits. If time can be edited like that, then there are entire civilizations of heroism that technically happened, but are now inaccessible to memory. They are gone in the way a deleted save file is gone, not just unwound, but overwritten by a new story that insists it was always the only story. You see this in time travel narratives all the time. A character remembers a future that has been erased. They carry ghost memories of friends who died in a war that officially never occurred, or of mentors who trained them in timelines that have been reset. In that specifically Adventure Time way, it's the feeling of Finn remembering Farm World, or Simon aching for a life only he can half recall. The records say no. Their bones say yes. So here is the quiet, slightly absurd question the universe leaves in your pillow. When you feel déjà vu, or an inexplicable gratitude toward no one in particular, what if that is a faint echo bleeding through from an edited-away branch? Not proof, just a resonance. A thank you from a hero whose timeline was cut, brushing against the one you get to keep. And if branches can be pruned, you already know what comes next. Somewhere, somewhen, something has to be doing the pruning. Ghost imprints. Cultural glitches where lost heroes used to be. So if something is doing the pruning, then of course it leaves marks. Not clean cuts, scars, little glitches in culture where a hero used to be, like burning on an old screen at the center of time that no one remembers leaving on. Here is the thing. When a person is erased properly, you shouldn't see them in the record at all. No name, no statue, no epic poem, but reality is messy and timelines drag their feet. You get negative space instead. A sudden change in law with no clear pressure group behind it. A village that somehow survived 3 invasions with no tactical explanation. A ritual everyone performs once a year because we always have, even though the original danger it was shielding them from has been edited out of existence. Let's start with those local festivals. You've seen versions of this. A town lights lanterns and sends them downriver for the protector. No one can quite say who that protector was or what they protected anyone from. The priest has a theory, the mayor has a different one, and the kids just think it looks cool in photos. Or there's a saying your grandparents use, something like, That's our miracle on the bridge, clearly referring to some ancient rescue that nobody can actually narrate. The story is gone. The gratitude stayed. Folklore scholars live for that negative space. They read a legend about a nameless wanderer who appears once, saves a kingdom, and is never mentioned again. And they lean in. Simple, declarative. It's just a story, vivid metaphor. It's also a faint outline beneath layers of cultural paint. The silhouette of a real person whose details have been sanded off by time, and whatever cosmic bureaucracy handles memory. Historians do the same with archives. A general's biography will have 3 pages of detailed campaigns, and then one baffling line. And after the turning year, hostilities abruptly ceased. No explanation, just a seam where a hero used to be. And we're going to treat those seams like forensic evidence. Not a body, but fingerprints. Not a name, but a consistent distortion in how people behave. You see it in sudden taboos that don't match the environment, in oaths that invoke a title with no saint attached, in holidays that feel more like anniversaries of survival than celebrations of conquest. Think about that for a second. The universe resets the board, but culture keeps flinching at blows it no longer remembers. Taking pattern interrupt. Maybe you've met a lost hero and didn't notice. The co-worker everyone instinctively defers to in a crisis, for reasons they can't articulate. The crosswalk where drivers brake a little earlier than they do anywhere else in the city. In that specifically Adventure Time way, the timeline forgets, but muscle memory in the multiverse lingers. So as you drift, look around your own reality. The family rule no one questions. The building everyone walks around, not through. The phrase your community uses that points to a rescue scene with the middle cut out. Those are the quiet pressure marks of erased lives. Not proof, just echoes. And in the next part of this timeline, we'll follow those echoes backward, toward the systems that decide which heroes get to stay, and which ones are gently folded out of the frame. The ethics of forgetting. Do we owe lost heroes our memory? And which ones are gently folded out of the frame? Here is the thing. Once you notice that, you can't unsee it. You start realizing that if countless people have quietly saved or improved this world, this timeline, this little corner of the multiverse you're sleeping in, then what, if anything, do we owe them now? Not the famous heroes with statues and theme songs, the ones who died in the hallway outside the throne room, the nurse in the second wave, the nameless guardian who held the door and never made it into the legend. Let's start with the impossible part. You cannot remember them all. You can't even know who they were. Time has erased their names, burned their faces out of the film, shredded the records, or never wrote them down in the first place. So any ethic of remembrance cannot be about perfect recall, like some cosmic spreadsheet where every hero gets a row. It has to be symbolic. Gestures, not a database. Think about that for a second. Our morality here has to operate without data. That is why cultures keep inventing the same ritual in different costumes. The tomb of the unknown soldier, the shrine to unnamed saints, the memorial for frontline workers, without listing every cashier, janitor, paramedic, or exhausted doctor who bent reality a little to keep someone else breathing. A moment of silence at the center of time, observed at 11:11, or on a random Tuesday, or in the quiet of your own room as you drift. These are all ways of paying a debt we know we can't actually settle. Interest piling up across the universe while we offer a few seconds of attention as partial payment. And yet, there's a sharper question under that. Is saying their names, when we even have them, the main point? Or is there a deeper way to honor someone whose whole deal was acting without expectation of reward, of power, of a wish cashed in later? If a lost hero spent their one life holding the line so strangers could exist, then maybe the closest you can get to real remembrance is to quietly continue their work. To protect when you could ignore, to help when you could scroll, to accept that you may also be edited out of the official story. In that specifically Adventure Time way, The universe keeps asking, do you want credit or do you want impact? You can't always have both. You are listening to this long, drifting timeline right now, and that in itself is a small ritual, a way of saying, I know there were more of you than I will ever meet. I know you were here, and we're going to go one step further, because there is a place in this mythos where that quiet gratitude stops being abstract, and the rules of who gets remembered become terrifyingly precise. You in the timeline, recognizing your own lost hero moments. And here is the thing the timeline does next. It quietly, almost shyly, points back at you. Not the abstract you, not humanity as a concept. You, specifically, lying here, breathing in the dark, with your own small archive of moments that never made it into anyone's history book. Let's start there, in that private, unsorted pile of memories you don't usually label as anything special. Remember the time you gave someone directions and watched their shoulders drop with relief before you both vanished back into your separate timelines. Or the late message you sent because you had a strange, tiny spike of concern and it turned out they really needed to hear from someone right then. Or the way you stepped between two people when the argument was just about to harden into something that would have left a crack. Those are not accidents. Those are edits. Small edits. Micro acts of lost heroism. Not the kind that bend the multiverse, but the kind that nudge a single Tuesday. You change the vector of another person's existence by 1 or 2 degrees, and then time just keeps going. No fanfare. No achievement unlocked. Think about that for a second. In a universe obsessed with spectacle, the most stable form of power might be the quiet course correction that no one can quote later. We're going to call these your personal local wishes, not spoken to a cosmic entity at the center of time, but cast into reality through your choices. You don't phrase them out loud, but you act them. I wish you would get home safe. I wish you wouldn't feel alone tonight. I wish this doesn't scar you as badly as it could. And then you leave the scene, because your bus arrives, or your break ends, or you simply never see them again. Here is the thing about those moments. They do not feel like heroism from the inside. They feel like what anyone would do, or nothing really. They are not accompanied by orchestral music. They are accompanied by awkward small talk, the hum of fluorescent lights, the cosmic comedy of you trying to remember where you parked. But if the Lost Heroes mythos has taught us anything in this video, it's that the universe does not only run on meteors and prophecies, it runs on these tiny, unrecorded course fixes. You are not outside the story, watching noble strangers vanish into the dark. You are a cell in the same strange organism, one of countless quiet agents maintaining a reality that never quite collapses as badly as it could have. This is not a call to perform goodness for the camera of your own ego. You do not need to scale up, or be more dramatic, or chase some grand narrative arc. The rules here are almost boringly gentle. Notice, respond, move on. Let the pride be soft, like a blanket, not sharp like armor. So as you drift towards sleep, you can let yourself imagine that every unnoticed kindness you have ever offered is filed in the same invisible archive as the ancient guardians and forgotten champions we've been visiting. Different scale, same fabric. You are held by that lineage, and you are helping hold it together. And the timeline is not done yet, because there are places where those private edits collide with the larger, cosmic resets we've hinted at. Moments when an ordinary life brushes against the machinery that decides who gets remembered at all. The serenity of letting go, meaning without monuments. Those collisions are loud on the cosmic scale. Timelines shudder, monuments crack, records burn. But then, if you zoom in, there is something else happening in the quiet between edits. People doing the right thing in absolute obscurity, and then simply moving on. Let's start with a strange proposal. Maybe the deepest form of meaning does not live in the archive at all. Not in stone, Not in the multiverse's equivalent of a high score table, not in a plaque at the center of time. Maybe it lives in the exact second an act is done, in the way reality briefly rearranges itself around a single decision, and then keeps going. Here is the thing. Legacy is restless. Legacy wants its name on buildings, on follow accounts, on metrics that climb forever. It wants the universe to clap. It wants the wish of being seen to be granted in every timeline at once. Think about that for a second. That is an exhausting desire to carry around in one small temporary body. By contrast, there is the very quiet satisfaction of the lost hero. The one who pulls a stranger back from the edge, or stays up all night watching a sick child, or stands in front of a door so someone else can get away, and never tells anyone. No statue, no song, just a private adjustment to existence that leaves no obvious trace, the way a hand smoothing a wrinkled sheet leaves nothing but calm. The universe has metaphors for this baked into its own physics. A tree grows in a forgotten valley, never photographed, never named. It drinks light for 100 years, then falls in a storm no one remembers. It rots. It feeds the soil. Other trees rise because it fell. It is not in any book, but the forest is different because it was there. Or a wave rolling in from some far moon-pulled horizon. It shapes the shore grain by grain, erasing footprints, carving small channels, rearranging the map in microscopic ways, and then dissolves back into the sea like it never existed. The power was in the motion, not in the monument. The lost hero's timeline is like that. It looks tragic if you stare only at the missing statues, the erased names, the pruned branches in the official record. But we're going to tilt it a little and see it instead as a meditation on this softer kind of meaning. A universe where good is constantly done and constantly let go of, like breathing. In, out, act, release, pattern interrupt. What if being forgotten is not the failure state, but just the default operating mode of a healthy reality? In that specifically Adventure Time way, the cosmos is crowded with unnamed guardians, unknown soldiers, faceless saints, all exhaling their small acts into the dark and not demanding a receipt. Tonight, you do not have to negotiate with the future. You do not have to secure your place in any archive. For now, it is enough that you exist, that you care at all, that in this brief intersection of you and time, you are capable of kindness. You can let the pressure to be remembered go for a while. Let it drift out of your body like breath leaving your lungs. The monuments can wait. The metrics can reset. Right now, lying here, you are already part of the quiet lineage that holds the timeline together, even if no one ever writes your name down. A soft return to the beginning, from one erased hero back to the many. So now as you're lying there, breathing a little slower, we go back to where we began. Let's start at the edge of erasure again. One hero. One person standing in the doorway between existence and forgetting. The battlefield is still smoldering, or maybe it's the burning library, or the collapsing tower with the sky folding in like wet paper. Their outline is already going pale at the edges, like the universe is gently using an eraser on the margins of the page. They are about to be removed from the timeline so cleanly that even the ash won't remember them. Here is the thing. This moment doesn't feel empty anymore, because now, when you look at that single figure, you can see the crowd behind them, not in front of your eyes exactly. More like behind your eyes. Faint silhouettes, layered over the scene the way Prismo's infinite screens layer realities at the center of time. The prehistoric guide who led a tribe away from a volcanic shore. The ancient builder who redirected a river and quietly saved a city. The medieval healer who stayed in the plague village when everyone else ran. The modern worker who double-checked the failing bridge design one last time. The anonymous digital age savior who pulled the plug on a bad line of code before it could crawl through the multiverse of servers. All of them standing there, transparent as this one hero fades. They have no names now. Or rather, they have too many names, all blurred into a soft, unreadable script. But their effects are still solid. You are breathing air in a world they preserved. You are moving through a reality shaped by disasters that never happened, by wars that ended 3 days earlier than they were supposed to, by cultures nudged half a degree closer to kindness. Think about that for a second. You live in the negative space of their actions, in the quiet absence of tragedies they already paid for. So the emotional tone of that first image changes. It is still sad, there is still loss there, but it is no longer an isolated tragedy where the universe shrugs and walks away. It feels more like a ritual, a familiar step in a long dance the timeline keeps doing with itself. One more hero reaching the end of their wish, bowing out so reality can stay coherent, so the rules of memory don't completely shatter. We're going to slow down with them. The smoke from the battlefield drifts more lazily now. The falling books in the burning library seem to hang in the air a little longer before they land. Time stretches, not in a flashy cosmic power way, but in that specifically Adventure Time way, where a quiet pause has more force than an explosion. The multiverse holds its breath. The silhouettes behind our hero lean forward, as if to catch them when they finally slip. And just before they vanish completely, before the universe decides they were never here at all, something else moves at the edge of the frame, in a place we haven't looked at yet. The timeline in one breath. Quietly weaving the ages together, something moves, and when we finally look straight at it, we realize it isn't a single hero at all, but a whole timeline breathing in the dark. Let's start by letting it stretch out, very slowly, from the first flicker to right now, like one long unbroken inhale and exhale of the universe. At the beginning, under ice and stars, there are no names yet. Just primordial guardians, standing on shorelines that don't have maps, holding back storms that don't have meteorology, wrestling with creatures that feel more like bad dreams than biology. Their victories evaporate with the mist at sunrise. No records, no bards, just the memory of a village that never quite flooded. And then even that fades. Time moves. Rock turns to road. Those guardians blur into ancient cities and empires, into engineers who reinforce walls before the big quake, healers who quarantine the plague before it has a name, a nameless soldier who stops a panicked king from ordering the wrong war. Here is the thing. Each one is edited almost as soon as they act. A scribe simplifies the story. A ruler adjusts the narrative. A priest forgets to mention the inconvenient miracle. Political edits slide in quietly, like someone revising a wish after it's already been granted. Think about that for a second. Fires and floods help too. Very practical little agents of oblivion. A library goes up, and with it, 3 whole lifetimes of unsung guardians. A monastery drowns, and so do the names of the monks who kept a pandemic from crossing a mountain pass. Reality doesn't cackle when this happens. It just turns the page. We're going to keep drifting. Medieval villages and monasteries give way to early modern ships and workshops. A navigator quietly ignores a cursed route that would have led an empire into disaster. An apprentice sabotages a weapon design before it can scale. Some of them take vows of anonymity, some just never speak up, and bureaucracy does the rest. Paperwork misfiles them, ledgers misname them. A clerk chooses the shorter version of the story because they want to get home on time. Then the present arrives, in that specifically Adventure Time way where the modern world still feels a little enchanted, if you squint. Heroes in hospitals reroute a chain of infections. Someone in a data center patches the vulnerability before the wrong person notices. Algorithms decide which faces trend and which disappear below the fold. Timeline pruning, if you want the cosmic label. No engagement, if you want the corporate one. And through all of it, there's this quiet tragedy that somehow doubles as a deep comfort. They rise, they act, they dissolve back into the flow. Over and over. The power is never in being remembered, It's in the moment of choosing to help when no one is watching, then letting existence close over you like water. If you're still awake, you don't need the details anymore. Let them blur. Hold on to one image. A world continuously saved by people who never make it into the story. An unseen network of care stretched across millennia, holding you the way they held everything else. It is sad. It is peaceful. It is the universe, somewhere near the center of time, finishing a very long, very gentle exhale, and already drawing in the next breath. If you're drifting, a gentle pause before we say goodnight, and already drawing in the next breath. If your eyes are closed now, you can leave them that way. You do not need to sit up. You do not need to follow every sentence. You can just let the words arrive like distant waves. You hear the crash, but not the individual drops of water. Here is the thing. At this point in the timeline, you are not really watching a video anymore. You are lying there, inside a quiet, private universe. And this is just background radiation humming along the edge of your awareness. Maybe you're catching one word in 10. Hero. Timeline. Multiverse. Maybe it's even less than that, and what you're actually hearing is cadence, breath, the gentle rise and fall of a voice talking about lost people while you drift somewhere between waking and whatever comes next. Think about that for a second. You are half asleep, and yet you are still traveling, still walking through ages of forgotten guardians, without having to move a single muscle. This is exactly how this story is meant to be experienced. Not as a quiz, not as homework, not as a test of how many names or rules or cosmic resets you can recite in the morning. It's more like falling asleep on a long train, while someone at the center of time quietly narrates the scenery outside the window. The landscapes pass. The heroes pass. We're going to keep going whether you're here for every detail or not, and that is okay, because even if the specifics dissolve by morning, the ancient civilizations, the erased nights, the modern strangers who stepped in front of disaster and then stepped back into anonymity. Some part of you has still sat with the idea that quiet effort matters. That existence is quietly held together by people who never get a statue, never get a saga, never get a wish granted in return. You may forget the law, but your body will remember the feeling that you belong in that network of invisible care. Let's start from there. Very gently. You, listening in the dark, are not just an audience member consuming a neatly packaged timeline. You are one of the many small, continuous choices that keep your corner of reality livable. The way you show up for a friend. The way you follow boring rules that keep strangers safe. The way you do the unglamorous maintenance on your own life. None of that will ever trend across the multiverse. It still matters. So thank you. Not as a viewer, not as a metric on some cosmic dashboard, but as a fellow participant in that invisible maintenance of the universe. You are one more quiet guardian in a very long chain of them. In that specifically Adventure Time way, you are both completely ordinary and cosmically significant at the same time. In a moment, if you happen to still be awake, we're going to do a tiny bit of channel housekeeping. Very soft, very optional. No pressure, no urgency. If you've already slipped past the edge of consciousness, you will miss all of it, and that is absolutely fine. The lost heroes will keep watch. The video will take care of itself. A whispered thanks, outro and soft call to stay connected. So here we are at the quiet edge of the timeline, where even the narrator is supposed to start whispering and backing away. The heroes have gone. The battles are over. Only the soft echo of their existence is still moving through your head like a distant train you're not sure you imagined. Thank you for staying with this story. Whether you listened to every word, tracking each erased knight and unnamed medic and forgotten guardian across the multiverse, or you drifted in and out, catching fragments the way you catch half-remembered dreams, it still counts. You still walked the path, or slept along it. Both are valid modes of travel through time. Here is the thing. You don't have to have been fully awake for any of this to work on you. A timeline can settle into you even if you only heard one sentence out of 10. A phrase about the center of time, a mention of a nameless soldier, a single image of a hero stepping forward, and then being gently edited out of reality. Think about that for a second. Your brain will do the rest while you sleep. If you found any comfort here, if tracing this long, slow arc of lost heroes made your own existence feel a little less alone, you can very quietly let the universe know. You can like the video. You can subscribe. You can just remember that it exists. And come back on some other night when the world feels heavy and you need a calm voice walking you through impossible rules and invisible courage. There is no rush. The timeline is patient. We're going to keep building these long contemplative journeys. Other timelines, other unseen figures, maybe the forgotten saints who never got names, or the background medics of history, or the cosmic custodians who sweep up after reality glitches. In that specifically Adventure Time way, we'll keep tying the absurd to the sincere, the cosmic to the deeply human, so you have more universes to fall asleep inside whenever you need the company. But right now, there is nothing you need to do. No algorithm to appease, no perfect wish to phrase, no comment to compose. Just breathe in and breathe out, and let the story slide from the foreground of your attention into the background hum of your own thoughts. Like a hero stepping off stage, like a name slowly dissolving from a monument no one visits anymore. If you're still barely awake, you can let this be your last clear moment, the last line of the script before the credits roll behind your eyelids. Somewhere out there, in some quiet corner of reality, the lost heroes are resting too, off the record, off the timeline, held, even if they are never written down again. So for tonight, may your own small heroism be seen, even if only by you. May your desires soften, your thoughts slow, and your power to keep going be allowed to rest. Let go of the day. Let go of the universe. Let the story end here, and let sleep take the watch. Appendix of echoes, optional reflections for the sleepless listener, and if somehow you are still here with me, still awake on the far edge of this timeline, then this little appendix is for you. This is the echo after the ending, the quiet scene after the credits, where nothing important happens and, secretly, everything does. Because here is the thing, some of you did everything right. Dark room, slow breathing, video on, and your mind just refused to power down. It kept scrolling through anxieties like they were channels in a tiny multiverse only you can see. Old conversations, imagined disasters, that one weird email. Think about that for a second. You are lying still, but your inner universe is sprinting. Insomniacs, anxious thinkers, night shift souls, people who just like the hum of a voice at the edge of consciousness. You are the ones awake at the center of time, while everyone else in your local timeline is offline. It can feel like failure. It can feel like you broke some basic rule of how humans are supposed to exist. But we're going to reframe that, very gently. Let's start with identity. If most of what you do is forgotten, if the records are burned, the timelines reset, the credits roll with your name missing, what exactly is you? Is it the actions other people remember, or the quiet motives that never make it into any story? The lost heroes in this universe rescue villages that no longer exist, negotiate peace in wars that get erased by later wars, hold doors in hospitals where no one ever learns their names. When the archives are wiped, when reality edits itself, their public existence vanishes. But the inner decision, to show up, to care, to try, remains a kind of private gravity. That gravity doesn't need an audience. A wish does not stop being a wish because no one hears it spoken out loud. A hero does not stop being a hero because the multiverse misplaces the file. There is a strange freedom in that. No legacy to manage, no image to maintain, No pressure to be on brand for eternity. Just the small, almost invisible power of being there, in the moment where you are needed, even if the universe never writes it down. Sleeplessness can feel like that too. You, awake while others rest, pacing the perimeter of your own thoughts. Not dramatic, not cinematic. Just quietly holding the line against the night in your particular corner of reality. You are the unnamed guardian of the 3 a.m. watch, eyes open while the timeline around you powers down for maintenance. So if your wish tonight was, "Let me sleep," and reality has not granted it yet, don't treat that as failure. Treat it as another moment to practice soft attention. Notice the way your breath still keeps time without being asked. Notice the faint sounds of a world that continues even now. A car far away, a pipe in the wall, the low electric hum that proves you share this existence with a billion other insomniac heroes you will never meet. You don't have to fix anything. You don't have to earn rest with productivity. Right now, your only job is to witness your own existence with a little less judgment and a little more curiosity, to be the quiet historian of your own timeline, even if no one else ever reads the record. And when sleep finally arrives, late, unceremonious, like a bus that forgot the schedule, it will not ask for proof that you deserved it. It will just take the watch back from you. You can hand it over whenever you're ready. Micro timelines. Imagining a day in the life of an unremembered savior. So, let's start small. Not with a cosmic guardian at the center of time, but with a maintenance worker in a fluorescent hallway that hums like a tired universe trying to stay awake. It's 5:42 in the morning. The building is half asleep. Motion sensors lag. Coffee machines blink their little red eyes of desire. He badges in. No theme music, no prophecy, just the soft beep of a security reader that has never once appeared in a legend. He checks his clipboard, which is not a magic scroll, but might as well be, because every unchecked box is a tiny waiting timeline where something goes wrong. Here is the thing. His whole job is to keep disasters from ever becoming visible. He walks the same routes, past the same doors, through the same recycled air. From the outside, it looks like nothing is happening. But watch closer. He hears a faint buzz in a breaker panel that shouldn't be there. Not loud, not dramatic, just a wrong note in the background music of reality. He stops, opens the panel. One wire is heating too much, insulation barely darkened. He tightens, replaces, logs it. That's it. 5 minutes. Boring. Forgettable. In the main timeline, it stays boring. In the branch he quietly erased, that wire arcs at 2:13 p.m., kills power to a lab freezer, ruins months of medical samples, delays a treatment trial by a year. In another branch, the short sparks a fire that crawls through ceiling tiles like a slow, determined predator. Think about that for a second. In this universe, nothing happens. People complain about the flickering lights that never flicker. They will never know why. On another floor, a nurse pauses outside a patient's room. Vitals are fine. Chart is fine. The rules say she can move on, but the patient's breathing has a rhythm that scratches at the edge of her memory. She steps in anyway, asks one extra question, orders one extra test. It comes back bad, not catastrophic, yet just early. She calls the doctor. They adjust the meds. The crisis that would have exploded at 3 a.m. never arrives. We're going to call that what it is: quiet power. The ability to close a timeline before it even learns its own name. By evening, the building looks the same. Servers stayed up because a systems admin patched a vulnerability no one will ever see on the news. The lab stayed cold. The patient watched reality TV and complained about hospital food. No headlines, no hero shots. He goes home tired, scrolling his phone on the train, feeling like he didn't do much. She kicks off her shoes, wondering if any of it mattered. They sleep without knowing they are the negative space in the painting of disaster. And as you lie there listening, you can imagine the multiverse thick with days like this, a dense web of uncelebrated protection, stretching across your city, your country, your planet, in that specifically Adventure Time way, where the universe is held together by people who will never be statues, only passing shadows on someone else's security camera. Somewhere, right now, another lost hero is making a decision so small it will never be remembered. Except here for a moment, in your timeline. Shared amnesia. Why we forget together and why that's okay. So that lost hero in your city makes their quiet choice, and the moment ripples out, and then, for almost everyone, it dissolves. No statue. No plaque. Not even a name you could Google if you tried. Here is the thing. Your brain was never designed to be a universal archive. Human memory is not the time room. You do not stand at the center of time with infinite screens, perfectly tracking every timeline and every helper who ever nudged reality away from disaster. You get a few bright constellations, a handful of stories, and then a long, soft dark full of everything you will never know. Let's start with that limit. You forget where you put your keys. You misplace entire years. Whole friendships blur into a mood, a smell, a vague sense of who you used to be. So of course you cannot carry every paramedic, every anonymous coder patching a security flaw, every stranger who once pulled someone else back from the edge of a train platform. It is not a moral failure. It is just the geometry of being small in a vast universe, of having a finite mind inside an effectively infinite multiverse of events. Cultures figured this out long before neuroscience gave it a name. That is why we get the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, nameless saints, faceless guardian spirits, titles like first responder or healthcare worker that flatten thousands of lives into a single archetype. Simple, declarative, vivid metaphor. We build these collective shortcuts the way Prismo uses one wish to stand in for a lifetime of desire, a compressed symbol standing where millions of specific faces could be. It looks cold at first. One marble slab for countless dead. One phrase in a history book. Local resistance fighters, covering people who laughed and loved and were afraid. But we're going to see it differently. These shorthands are culture quietly admitting, we cannot name you all, but we can aim our gratitude in your direction. We cannot remember every timeline, but we can leave a placeholder in reality that says, someone stood here. Someone mattered. Think about that for a second. The problem is not that you do not remember every hero. The problem would be if the few stories you do keep in your mental playlist had no room inside them for everyone else. What matters is not perfect recall. What matters is whether the myths you carry about bravery, care, sacrifice are spacious enough that an unknown nurse, or a forgotten translator, or a lost firefighter could slip into them and feel at home. So when you worry about forgetting, or being forgotten, you are not failing the rules of existence. You are just participating in the same fragile amnesia that has always wrapped itself around lost heroes. Your fear of vanishing is the quiet thread that ties you to them. Across time, across timelines, across every erased name. And yet, in that specifically Adventure Time way, the universe is not done editing its cast list. Because there are moments when forgetting breaks, when the timeline glitches, and one of those lost heroes suddenly steps back into focus. The soft edge of infinity, lost heroes in an endless universe, when the timeline glitches and one of those lost heroes suddenly steps back into focus. Let's start by zooming out so far that even those glitches look microscopic. Imagine the camera pulling away from your one little timeline, past your city, past the planet, past the solar system, until Earth is just another pixel in a dark ocean of pixels. Every one of those points of light, not just a star, a probability machine, a factory for forgotten names. Here is the thing. If the universe is big enough, if time is long enough, then Earth cannot be the only place that invented the lost hero. Somewhere on a frozen moon circling a red dwarf, there is a civilization that never discovered metal, but did discover sacrifice. And their greatest protector died keeping the last fire from going out. No statue. No archive. Just a story whispered twice and then swallowed by the wind. On a water world wrapped in permanent storm, there was once a navigator who learned to read lightning the way you read text messages. They guided floating cities away from a planetary-scale hurricane that should have erased their entire species from existence. They succeeded. Then the servers flooded, the records corrupted, and in one bad afternoon of cosmic humidity, their names slipped out of history like a deleted file. We're going to assume they had their own myths of unknown soldiers, nameless saints, faceless guardian spirits. Because when you have memory and desire and limited attention, you also have overflow. You have more goodness than you can reasonably keep track of. Think about that for a second. In a multiverse this dense with timelines, being remembered forever is not just unlikely, it is almost mathematically absurd. The rules of attention are their own quiet cosmic law. Brains prioritize disasters over helpers, villains over the steady friend who always shows up on time. So across the universe, narrative gravity pulls toward the loud, the catastrophic, the visually interesting, the quiet medic on the back line of an alien war. The engineer who patches the reactor in the middle of the night on a station no one will ever visit again. The parent who chooses to go hungry so a child on some distant rock can grow up and maybe, one day, look at their sky and feel safe. They are not evil. They are not indifferent. They are just unarchived. And in that specifically Adventure Time way, this makes the fantasy of being cosmically famous feel small. What matters, in the actual physics of your day, is the local wish you grant without calling it power. Pouring a glass of water, answering a message, sitting beside someone in the dark when reality feels too loud. So we fall back down now, out of the starfield, down through atmosphere, into your room. You in your blanket, in your particular corner of the center of time, breathing, existing, not trending, not carved into stone, just quietly altering the timelines of the few people who will ever really know you. On a cosmic scale, that is almost nothing. On their scale, and on yours, it is everything. And somewhere, just off screen, another edit is waiting, another hero about to be gently erased. One last thread, holding on to what you want to remember. Another hero about to be gently erased. And you do not have to chase them. If you're still even half awake, here is the thing. You don't need to carry this whole multiverse of lost names with you. Not every timeline, not every anonymous guardian, not every cosmic edit. Let most of it go. Let it blur at the edges like a dream you can feel but not quite retell. Instead, we're going to invite you to keep one small thread. Just one. An image, a sentence, a feeling that doesn't demand effort, that doesn't yank you back to full consciousness. Think about that for a second, in the laziest possible way. Whatever rises first is allowed to stay. Maybe it's the prehistoric guide in the storm, walking ahead of the frightened group with a torch made of resin and wind, knowing they will never carve his face into stone. The rain hitting his shoulders, the way he keeps moving anyway. A hero measured in footsteps, not statues. Or maybe it's the anonymous engineer in some fluorescent-lit corner of reality, tightening one last bolt on a bridge no one will ever think about while they cross it. No prophecy. No epic music. Just the quiet power of a wish they never even say out loud. Let this hold. Let this work. Let these strangers get home. You might keep the idea of being one root in a forest of care, hidden under the soil of existence. You are not the whole tree. You are not the skyline. You are the unseen network that keeps a few nearby lives upright. Invisible, indispensable, and completely untroubled by monuments. Or you might hold on to something even smaller, in that specifically Adventure Time way, the comfort of not needing to be remembered at all. The relief of knowing the universe does not require you to trend across time. You can be a private wish granted quietly, a single corrected timeline no historian ever notices. Whatever you choose, it does not have to be profound. It does not have to explain the rules of the universe, or solve the ethics of desire, or map every forgotten hero from the center of time to your pillow. It just has to feel gentle and true to you, right now, in this half-dreaming moment. Let's start to tuck that thought away. Imagine sliding it onto a small folded note and placing it inside a book on a shelf in your mind. You don't label the spine. You don't even remember the title. One night, years from now, you open it again without knowing why, and the note is waiting, patient, unchanged. And once it's shelved, that's it. You don't have to hold the whole library. You don't have to stay for the credits. We're almost at the final, very brief closure now, and there is nothing more you need to track, or fix, or understand. The timelines can keep editing themselves. Your only job from here is simple: rest. Lights down. Story fades. Closing the book on the lost heroes tonight. Rest. Let that word just sit there with you for a moment, like a book left open on your chest while the universe quietly turns the last page for you. Here is the thing. Tonight we walked through a long, invisible history together. A whole secret timeline of lost heroes, and now it doesn't need you anymore. Not actively, not consciously. It can drift. You traced forgotten guardians from the edge of prehistory to the edge of your own awareness, and you did that while lying in the dark, in that weird borderland between waking and sleep, where reality already feels a little elastic. Think about that for a second. You were following erased champions and cosmic resets, and quiet sacrifices, and at the exact same time your own mind was soft resetting itself for tomorrow. If the details are already blurring, that's not a failure, that's the point. You don't have to remember which hero vanished in which war, or which universe rewrote which name out of existence. You don't have to hold the rules of this mythos like a test you're going to be graded on in the morning. There is no quiz. There is only the feeling of not being alone in the dark. We're going to leave the sharp edges behind now. Let the specific scenes sink below the surface, like cities drowned under calm water, still there in the timeline but no longer demanding your attention. If tomorrow you wake up and all of this feels like a half-remembered wish you once made for company in the night, that is exactly right. In this video, the power was never in perfect recall. It was in gentle presence. So sleep among them. Sleep among unnamed protectors and erased champions, and the anonymous hands that held the line so your world could stay boring and survivable. Imagine them as a quiet crowd at the center of time. Not cheering, not asking for recognition, just standing watch while you finally get to set your burdens down. You get to be the one person in this multiverse whose only job, in this exact slice of existence, is to do nothing at all. If you ever want this feeling again, this whole story will still be here, waiting on the shelf, waiting like a light left on in another room. Every night you press play, the timeline will politely reassemble itself around you, reshaping the same legends in that specifically Adventure Time way, a little different, a little familiar, always patient. So we'll stop talking now. We'll let the universe dim the lights. We'll let the heroes go back to their quiet, and let you follow. Good night.